Hello and welcome back to the SMITE Pro League. Joining me on the desk this morning is no other than the incredibly talented Gormizer. Gore, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing. It's definitely hard to follow up what Aggro just said, but I'm doing. I guess that's the best way to say it.
100%. Well, listen, let's get ourselves back invested in the Pro League after the hiatus and show you guys exactly what's going on at the moment. To start things off, here's a little look at the schedule of everything that's going on at the moment and what has been going on. It might look a little bit confusing, and we'll get to that in a moment, but this weekend and this week, we've got a couple more games to play. Dragons versus Valkyries, Warriors versus Kings, Scarabs up against Leviathans, and Titans versus Bolts are the first set of games we're going to see over the next 2 days, and that will actually allow us to complete the very first half of Phase 1, which will, when we look at the standings, show that everybody has managed to play each other once. And that means then that everybody has had a chance to play each other, and then we move on to the group stage, which we'll come to momentarily. But here's a little look at the standings now. And Gore, as we said, there's 4 games still to be played by the end of Friday. And when you look at the standings, there is a chance of a 3-way tie for second place, if I believe.
Yeah, and that second place, like you said, really important because the top 2 teams are the teams that are going to be kind of coming up with the 2 groups for each other at that. And again, we'll go into more detail throughout the week, but fighting for that spot, having a tiebreaker that comes out there, all of these teams play someone that is in the bottom half, I believe. I think that, everybody that's going to be coming through, the Kings versus the Warriors, Dragons versus the Valkyries, and then tomorrow the Titans versus the Bolts. And so there's a good chance that they'll all go from 4-2 to 5-2. Maybe there will be a 4-3 in there. It's all going to be up to the luck of the draw over the next 2 days to see who is able to kind of claim the crown of number 2 right now.
And with that being said as well, basically what we're going to do is we're going to have the number 1 and number 2 teams in the league draft on Friday after the games are finished to work out which groups everybody falls into. The second team will draw whoever is going to be in the group for the first team, and the first team is going to draw teams for the second team. But if there is a 3-way tie, we will be broadcasting those games too, and we'll be making sure we have a final top 2 in the selection. So expect potentially more SMITE tomorrow if the standings fall as they may. But first of all, let's move on then, go to exactly what we're going to see first of all today. It's the Valkyries up against the Dragons first of all. And let's be honest, both teams are having an arduous journey at the moment. Dragons coming off the back of 2 losses in a row, and Valkyries still having a hard time finding their footing in the lead.
Yeah, 4 losses in a row there for the Valkyries. And, like 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, you'd have asked me anything about this set, and I would have told you that the Dragons theoretically win this 1-2-0. Look over, I tell you the fastest game so far that we've seen is 22 minutes, and the Valkyries were on the receiving end of that loss. And I tell you that the Dragons are going to beat that. But also, the last time we watched the Pro League, the Scares beat the Dragons. So, honestly, I'm not sure what's going to go on. Plus, I mean, look, we haven't been, there's been 2 patches now, 8.5 plus the bonus that have been able to come through from the last time we had to now. So there's been a lot of buffs that came in 8.5, a lot of nerfs that came in the bonus patch. So there's a lot of things that I think are going to shake up just the fundamental of the game. One of the things we were preparing a few weeks ago was going to be the upgraded Shell nerf, and like how that was kind of the big talking point. Shell has been the thing to go to the point where teams sometimes would have 3 of them, 4 of them on a side. And so how that shakes things up, I think we're going to get to see a lot of that. It's lucky that we get PBM and Raffer, 2 really, really excellent supports to watch and see how they kind of tackle new relics.
Yeah, completely agree. I think Valkyries have really struggled as of late, though. A lot of complaints about ping. However, we have teams over in Europe still that are performing better than them. Kings are some of those members who, they're not all on good ping, but they're still performing a little bit better than what the Valkyries are at the moment. So, as time goes on, sure, ping's going to be an issue, but how much of an issue is the real question? We'll probably get a chance to see that today up against the Dragons. And as we turn the attention to the Dragons, I mean, interesting thing, they lose 1 set against the Bolts and then go on to lose another set against the Scarabs in the same week. I didn't see that coming. I don't think a lot of fans really did. And the question is like where their mental is at now. Are they ready to roll again,
And there's, a couple of question marks for me. Like, if you come into this on the immediate back of those 2 losses, right, where are the Dragons at? I think that shakes things up, but they've been able to kind of marinate in it, and that could be for good or for bad. Now, like, over the last couple of weeks, like, we've seen a few members of the Dragons. Obviously, they seem fine normally, but getting into the game, how that's going to affect them as a team, I think they're going to be able to shrug off the losses pretty easily, especially at this point with a little bit of distance between it. But it does come to question and maybe kind of put a focal point on them. I think this is a really big turnaround point that for like their duo lane. You have to see Panda Cat locked in Artemis in the last set, right? Didn't necessarily win with her, but locked her in. Like having maybe kind of a revamp of what the Dragons are bringing over to that side. It's going to be helpful to go up against like Imolito and Raffer, players that they've gone up against in the past and that they've been successful against in the past. And I think as a whole, it's really just going to be a good way for them to jump right back into SMITE. Theoretically, it should be an easy win, right? But those don't seem to be coming too easily so far here in Season 8.
Well, we're joined by one of the coaches from the Dragons today. Kubom is now joining us. Kubom, you look fantastic in that jersey, first of all. Preferred you in a hi-rez shirt, if I'm honest. However, let's have a little talk with you guys real quick. I mean, obviously, there's a bit of a hiatus, an extended break. First real question for you, though, is like, how are you guys going to, deal with the item changes? I mean, there's been a lot of changes the last couple of patches, too. Do you think that's going to have a big effect in any way?
No, our team is very good at just testing things and finding what they feel is the best. I think even if you look at some of the builds that my team's been doing across like the phase already, they haven't been following what everyone else is doing. They kind of have the stuff they like and they stick to. So I don't think it's going to make a big difference for us.
And you guys, just like we had mentioned, had a couple of losses, again, a few weeks ago at this point, so mental's probably not shattered, but how are you approaching this week to kind of change that around and make sure that it doesn't happen again?
I think that in the previous weeks, we sort of got away with sort of drafting whatever we wanted. I think we didn't have a bad plan necessarily, but I think it was you guys talking about how Sam and Mike had picked it was 10 different gods each or something. It was some crazy number, right? Yeah. So we took the time between our last set and now to really sort of isolate picks that we thought were really strong and start figuring out what we think the best drafts look like. So we've been really productive in Scrum since then.
Cool. So with all the item changes coming through, nerfs to shell and stuff, do you expect, I know you're not going to give secrets away, Kabom, but at the same time, do you expect changes in the hunter role, the jungle, because that's where a lot of people are probably talking about now, shell changes, arrow changes for gold regen. They have a big impact, I guess, on what gods may get picked up.
Yeah, I think you'll see some different gods. SPL teams seems to be a little bit more rigid sometimes, I think, in that they're not willing to change which gods, so you'll see a pretty slow shift compared to what you're seeing in your rank games and stuff, I think, but you'll see the changes come through.
Okay, well, good luck today. Hopefully things go swimmingly for the most part. And we'll get more surprises on Twitter as the day goes on. That'll be exciting to see too. Thanks for joining us, though, Kabam. You go get yourself ready for the game with your team. And with that, I guess time will for us to start talking a little bit more about picks and bans. And I guess some of those changes too, because the focus really is on the jungle role. Will we see more set and the likes because of the shell changes? And what is the build going to be in the jungle too, to be honest, because there's been a few changes there. And more importantly, the hunter role with the changes to Gilded Arrow. Will we see as much of that? Execution and nerfs. There's so many wild things that we've got to go over.
I'm actually really excited. The shell nerf, like you said, that's probably the one I think that catches my eye the most for this set specifically. And it's just because the Johnny's God pool is extensively full of auto-attack junglers. I mean, his Bakasura, his Kali, like you said, Set. There's a lot where he really loves to focus it. I think even Mercury can be thrown out in there. A lot of these gods that were just straight up countered by this shell are going to have an easier time. Now, it's still doing, 50% less damage from basic attacks while they have that shield. But it's a lot easier to get rid of a shield than it is to get rid of the block stacks, right? So I think that's going to open up the door for Johnny to start to flourish a lot more. I believe Loki's going to be back. He was unbanned back when 8.5 dropped, so he's going to be available for him. A lot of the success the Valkyries had was with the Loki in the jungle, so I think there's a lot of openings for specifically the jungle route, but realistically all of the Valkyries to try and find a lot more footing and set themselves up for success, as well as a couple of things and a couple of nerfs that are going to be hitting the Dragons on the other side. Things like the King Arthur. Granted, of course, we've seen FinoK's God Pool. King Arthur is just the top because he's so good right now. But as well as things like the Heimdall, the Onher were nerfed. So a couple of hunter picks, a couple of those side lanes, those pillars for the Dragons maybe being stripped away and giving another avenue of success for the Valkyries to try and pick on.
On top of that, we've also got changes to Persephone. We've also got Gilgamesh potentially in the mix too. We could really see things shake up in picks and bans. Yeah. So the question is it going to be Tiamat consistently banned the whole time? Loki's not available though, just to be clear at the moment. But we've got a lot of changes in terms of gods coming in, gods being reworked, item changes too. And so where things fall out is going to be very interesting. More importantly for me, with the shell changes, where will supports go? Will they go for the shell still?
Yeah.
Because it's still a solid item in the early game. Or will we see a bit more of the rock, paper, scissors, of more horrific emblems, a little bit more blink? The good news is we get to see all that today and over the couple.
I'm
Into
really
picks and bans
excited.
we go then.
Like you had mentioned, horrific kind of being that item that has been on the rise, and I feel like at the tip of my tongue is like, if you weren't going to get X, Y, or Z, that was the one to go for. If it wasn't Frenzy, it's Horrific Emblem, and now you can go Frenzy Horrific theoretically, right? Buff your team, nerf the other team, feel really solid about it. I think it's going to be interesting to see how the Dragons play, because they do like to get a little aggressive over there, and it feels like that is a breeding grounds for an early Horrific Emblem.
Well, Anher did take a nerf, but still going to be first banned from the Valkyries here, alongside Tiamat 2, so no seeing Tiamat so far in Game 1. Sobek and Jing Wei across from that. No real surprise to see that Jing Wei ban, though, Gore, because Emilito's been kind of hard holding on to that one as of late.
If I remember looking at it, like it's ridiculous. Most of the Jingwei games that have been played are on Emilito. He's played it 8 times so far, and they've only played 13 games, right? So 5 games where he's been forced onto something else. And if I can find her real fast, it's got to be a little more than 8, but she has been not picked up as much. 19 times, so he's around half, maybe a little under there, of the total picks in the league. And a couple of those have been, like Bara, a couple of people kind of falling onto Jingwei after you're on her, after your Heimdall. And so it's interesting to see them go for that first. I mean, the Valkyries, again, have been picking that pretty much over any other hunter, so it's going to make Emilito a little more uncomfortable.
Well, I do believe Persephone might be available today. I'm wondering if we'll see Gilgamesh, first of all, from the Valkyries. And this pick for me, I'm hearing rumblings of support Gilgamesh over other roles at the moment. I don't know if that's exactly true, so we'll have to see how the rest of the draft goes out. But do you think he's warranted first pick, Gore? That's my real question.
I mean, you know, I want to say new god bias, which immediately means yes, he is absolutely, like, I mean, him and Tiamat have been up at the top, but I'm interested. I might be biased because I was literally watching Ducky earlier this morning and he was playing Gilgamesh in solo, but, like, the fact that we're seeing pros, like, I mean, you just mentioned solo, I think we're seeing people experiment with where he can be. It means that he's got a lot of flexibility. This is the first time he's being played, so that nobody really knows on the Dragons where they need to deal with him, how they need to counter him, and I think it also is going to be really strong, right? I mean, even though he's been hit with quite a few nerfs since his release, he definitely seems, out of the 6 that were banned, like the next god up to try and lock in. It gives the Valkyries that wild card of engagement, plus a cool drop kick that's really going to displace things like this King Arthur. It's going to make it a lot harder for the front line on the Jade Dragons to be successful.
So we're going to see the Sun Wukong up against King Arthur in the solo lane, unless we see Sun Wukong flex elsewhere. Don't really see it. However, more than likely, that's the matchup we'll see there. So expect some, trades over in that lane. I mean, Bluestone got nerfed as well in terms of regen, I believe, Gore. So if Bluestone's been nerfed, do we see these gods go elsewhere? I think they're both Bluestone-specific sort of gods in that solo lane. But that means there's more chance of death if there's not as much regen in that lane.
Yeah, a little less dot for them, so and maybe not going to have quite the same capabilities of turning fights around in their favor, but we'll see. Again, I think King Arthur, at least from what we've seen in the past, is going to have a more stable success no matter what items. Like, he just feels like he has a good kit, and the items really enhance it, whereas Wukong, it does kind of depend on what he's picking up. So it's going to open up a conversation for them. Valkyries, though, again, this is something that they have been successful with in the past, and that I think is going to be able to hold its own. Wukong, I mean, we used to joke all the time about how he was the god of surviving. Whether or not his team went down with or without him, he would definitely be able to get out of there. I think he's still going to have a lot of that safety here.
Yeah, I think his job as Sun Wukong is to terrorize the backline where possible and keep them out of the fray, but how much damage can he absorb from the Heimdall is going to be the first question, and whatever mid lane or Horrorwind ends up picking up here. Fafnir, though, locked in again for Ratha. It's one of his go-tos from years gone by, and Fafnir did get some real good love as of late as well. Cooldown reduction on his 1 and his 3, his 2 engage abilities. I think that could make a really big impact as the game goes on. We may see more Fafnir as the season progresses, as Awilix and Chang'e are taken out of the fray.
Yeah, and one of those, like, Awilix, you look at Jade Dragons, you see that Sam's over there. That makes sense. And honestly, Chang'e makes sense against the Valkyries. I will say, from what we've seen, she hasn't been widely successful, but it makes sense because they have been favoring her. And it is, I still think, a relatively good pick. I love Chang'e, so, like, in any game I can play her, if I can justify playing her, I'm going to lock her in. A lot of good healing, and that's something that we saw, again, nerfed at Season 8, but because hers is a little more in combat and combat-oriented, it's very helpful, especially against something like a Yamoja, where their anti-heal comes into the equation as well. So it makes sense for them to try and target that and keep that under control.
Well, on top of that too, now as you look the bans coming through, the Chonga and the Raijin taken away from Zeros in the mid lane. And funny enough, they've held their junglers and mid laners, both teams here. I feel like Jade Dragons have done a pretty consistent job of like kind of holding off on that mid pick as of late. But mostly it was the support and obviously the jungler that Dragons were leaning on, waiting for in that second phase. However, this time they're going to hold off, and there's something I was expecting at some point. This Sol that may be back in the mid lane now with the recent changes.
Yeah, this is something that's really going to be interesting to see if she stays here. And honestly, looking at it, if Heroin can play it at the level, I mean, technically we've seen Heimdall flop over there, but like you said, all the rumblings of Sol and Sol that I've seen has been more mid-oriented. And has good clear, is going to be very capable over there. And so there's a little bit of a test to Heroin. I think he's an accomplished mid laner. Like, we joke about the fact that he's a one-trick on Yanis, but admittedly it's just because he's really, really good at Yanis. And so I want to see that translate. Some of his highlights earlier were even on, like, Cool Khan and things like that. So this Sol, it'll be interesting. I think the Dragons are going to be able to showcase some of the new items and like the changes specifically to things like Chiron's coin early on. I think it's going to make a very big impact. But I mean, if you're talking about what a mage and a carry, at least on the side of the Dragons, or a hunter that can swap between roles, the Valkyries do the exact same thing.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Neath mid here for sure. I can definitely see that coming in with Kronos on for Emilito of all people. That kind of makes sense to me. One of his tried, true, and tested mage duo laners, I should say. More importantly, I do want to give credit to Dragons here and their picks and ban strategy go too, because for me, when I heard Sol was rumbling, I know Zeros loves his Sol in the mid lane. It's something he's gone back to time and time again. He loves the safety factor of that Sol. So when it was left up in the picks and bans of the counter ban section, I was like, well, maybe they missed something here, but they didn't. They draft the Sol for themselves, take it away from Zeros, and make him go deeper in the pool. I do believe it's this Neath mid, though. That's what I'm going to say here. I'm going to almost rest my hat on that one.
I mean, it's going to be an interesting matchup no matter what, right? Because for Sol and Neath, this is the first time this year that we're getting to really see them and get to see the fruition of what they are. Neath is one of those gods that, mid has always suited her really well. Technically, it's the shortest path from anywhere on the map for her to be able to get her ult off, and that's going to make things a little bit easier for whichever person, whether it's Wukong, Gilgamesh, on the side of the Valkyries going into the jungle. It's going to make things easier for them to try and find easy ganks and easy lockdown. But Sol versus, like, Kronos, like, let's say if that's in mid, that's going to take a lot more time. I wouldn't be surprised if, like you said, that is Emilito playing Kronos just to give him a lot of time to farm up. But time is going to be of the essence. I mean, we've been looking at it. The last game, or the fastest game so far that we've seen this year, the Valkyries had lost in 22 minutes. The Dragons are the kind of team that really do like to put the pressure on you. And with Sam playing something like a Raven with the Sol coming through, it feels to me like they want to get aggressive very fast. And while Neath is pretty early on, Fafnir and Wukong can hold themselves early on. Gilgamesh, as of right now, I have yet to see in Pro League play, but seems to be able to hold himself pretty well. It feels like the Valkyries have a draft that is oriented a little bit more into the late game, going to be more beneficial to have a 20-25 minute game plus, whereas the Dragons should be able to get things under their belts pretty much right around the 6-minute mark and start dictating the pace of the game. And if they get good control that early on, it's going to be very difficult for the Valkyries to claw their way back into it.
Yeah, I completely agree. It will lean a little bit more towards the later stages with that Kronos. I mean, I will say as the guys are loading into game right now, this Gilgamesh pick, I expected more support, but it is going to be jungle, I expect, for Johnny here. So I'm excited to see how this, works out in the jungle. His gank potential, not too bad with the drop kick, but how can he utilize that with the rest of his team? I think there's going to be a lot of this World Weaver play coming in from this Neath in the mid lane, if it is there, where we could see some light side lane ganks. And maybe, just maybe, Gore, the idea should be to try and lean towards the duo lane in this one. Heimdall's not the greatest in terms of mobility. Sure, he's got the Bifrost, but a World Weaver and a Gilgamesh gank, that could really help them out, I would say. Maybe expect to see the Valkyries try and lean on that potentially.
I actually really like that idea because Neath, like you said, the World Weaver gives her the presence and gives that stun setup to Gilgamesh no matter where he's going to be. But also, if he comes to mid lane, theoretically, and I never get to talk about this, you get to lay out all those weaves. If you do any backflips, anything like that, it's either going to be good restoration for yourself, keep yourself alive in mid lane, or another really big AoE damage route that you're going to be able to throw down onto an opponent. Ideally set things up for a good dropkick back towards you on your side of the map, make it a very difficult path back to safety for the other team.
I definitely think my biggest concern, though, is the lack of engage from Valkyries. It's very linear in terms of the engage options. It's a Fafnir hammer, it's a Sun Wukong diving in, or a Gilgamesh diving in. There's nothing really extra to allow them to get some setup there outside of that World Weaver. So as this game goes on, just keep an eye on that, of the lack of like hard engage they're going to have in team fights. Maybe they're going to let Jade Dragons come onto them a little bit with these engagements and then look to counteract that, because that's kind of the strategy of this team comp we've got here. But without further ado, it's Valkyries versus Dragons. We've got Dolson and Aggro standing by to bring you the cast.
Thank you very much, Hindu and Gormizer. My name is Dolson. Aggro is with me for the Jade Dragons and the Valhalla Valkyries. Doug, of course, working the cameras for us here for game number 1. Aggro, last time we saw the Dragons, last 2 times we saw this Dragons team, a couple of stumbles. First time we've seen that happen so far here in Season 8 for the Dragons. This is one where you feel like they need to bounce back.
Certainly they should. And look, not to take anything away from the Bolts or from the Scarabs, both of whom played very, very clean and excellent Smite that weekend, we can look at the way that the Jade Dragons played and realize that it is not the same level that they were playing at previously. So as bad as those losses I'm sure felt for those guys, it is only one weekend of games. So I'm excited to see what they've been working on in the downtime.
Well, Aggro, there's a lot apparently that has been worked on meta-wise in the downtime. Valhalla Valkyries throwing a lot at the dartboard here. Hurrywind as well, playing the Soul out of the mid lane, so there's something to look at there as well. We got a Kronos over here in the dual lane. Rapper has got the Fafnir, which is maybe the least surprising thing on the map right now. Maybe we start with one of the newest gods to get added in the game, and it's Johnny piloting this Gilgamesh out of the jungle. What are some expectations here for Johnny here in game 1?
I'm really glad that we get to see Gilgamesh debut in the jungle, because I think that this is where he's the most exciting to me. He always felt very, very potent in the jungle during those play tests and everything like that. And I think that when I'm thinking about what Gilgamesh is going to bring to the map, it's a lot of disruption, and it is a surprising amount of burst damage and control that he's going to bring. He's not insane early or insane late. I think he's really well-rounded. He just fights well throughout.
Well, look at that first drop kick of the season here in Season 8, and it's on to Sanford Soccer for Johnny to disengage. So first blood avoided for the time being, but already pressure from this Robin. A pick that does hold true from before our break to now. A pick that a lot of teams have found success with. Some cleave damage over here in the duo lane. Emilito low on health, low on mana as well. Raffer attempting to go back to base here. Maybe you expect this, though, Aggro. Early on in the game, Panda Cat on this Heimdall, PBM on the Emoja, being able to bully out some of the scaling that Emilito is going to have to do.
Definitely expects the Dragons to have dual lane control, probably complete dual lane control around the early game, because they have this Emoja in particular, but as you mentioned, the Kronos really going to take some time to scale up. And I wonder how willing Johnny's going to be to fight early. We've seen on his picks like the Loki, where he was playing that a lot when it was available. He was really trying to get to that team fighting phase, was not going to mess around early on. Is Raffer going to hog that purple buff and ended up picking it up himself? Nice idea to go back and buy the hog to make sure that you can secure and make sure. But that still sets Raffer behind in the build. Dragon's certainly not going to be upset that Raffer spent that gold and forced them to split it anyways on that purple. But this Gilgamesh pickup is one that I think can fight a little bit early, but doesn't necessarily need to. I think that the Valkyries just need Johnny to fight early based on what they have in their composition. I mean, you've got Wukong, which is pressure, you'd hope, in that solo lane, though you've got an Arthur to contend with on that side of the map, which isn't going to be easy. I don't think that you get pressure in mid. I think Soul out pressures Neath through the first 7 or 8 levels, and then it goes pretty even. And you've certainly losing pressure on this left-hand side if you're the Valkyries. So I want to see Zeros use these World Weaver ultimates in order to influence fights on the side lanes, particularly on defending their buffs on this left-hand side, because I would expect the Dragons to be here in force whenever it comes to these purple buff estates.
Appears to be plenty of carry scaling on both sides. A couple magical ADCs and a couple of regular old ADCs on either team. Jade Dragons are going to collapse on the mid lane. Harpies here, grab some XP, some gold over to themselves here as Hurrywind Still feeling comfortable on this Soul. Then you have to wonder, Aggro, I mean, a lot of this is theory crafting. We're going to have to figure out the way the pros want to go build-wise with these sorts of picks. Kronos maybe feeling good with the ring-style build, get some of that attack speed on, really cleave those autos in there, weave them into those fights, find some big damage. I'll hold that thought as Emilito now jumped on by Sanford Soccer. Ultimate gets used. Sanford Soccer reads it. Wants nothing else. Maybe sensing an impending collapse from the Valkyries, Sanford Soccer will back away.
Just getting that cooldown, and that sets up for the next invade, which should be coming up pretty shortly.
PBM looking for a stun, won't find it as Johnny and Rapper combine to try to take down these oracles here. Seems to be enough pressure. Zeros uses the World Weaver. Looks like that connects over onto Fino. Okay, Ducky's going to use the Somersault Cloud as well. Nobody else over here on the right-hand side of the map, so the King Arthur's going to stay alive for the time being. Ducky may be able to build up a little bit of that wave pressure, but kind of back to a previous point here, do you think that this Soul pick is one, Aggro, that can benefit from attack speed, magical ADC style build? Do you imagine there's some ability base worked into that kit, or is there some flexibility at hand as Fino K will survive?
I think flexibility is what I'm looking at. I'm excited to see what people are building on her because I've been watching a lot of streams, obviously. I've done a little bit of experimenting. I really liked just going mostly ability power with a Telkine's ring splashed in there, and it looks like that might be more the direction that Hurry's going to go because one of the big reasons, so Soul has had a bunch of changes recently, a bunch of buffs, and I think that she just has been underexplored, and all of a sudden people start exploring her because now she has way less post-fire delay on her Stellar Burst, which basically means you get to throw an auto as your 2 is exploding. It sets it up for you really nicely, and it feels really smooth and really good to use. But it's also that an item that she uses really well in Spear of the Magus got buffed and it added Lifesteal, which is an item, which is an ability subsec, basically a stat that people love on these magical ADCs. So she gets a couple of buffs in a row. She gets a big item buff, and she gets an actual buff in the post-fire removal. So you're feeling really good right now if you're Soul. I think you want to build Magus basically every game. It's a matter of how much more ability power you want to go after that. Do you want Demonic and something like that Telkine's? I think you can get away with just using her passive in a Telkine's ring for the attack speed that you need and really letting your abilities shine a little bit more than they have in the past.
Yeah, flexibility is important, especially while the pros are still figuring out the ideal path, and so we'll keep an eye on what Hurrywin builds right on through there. Spear of the Magus definitely looks like it will be the first option here for Hurrywin, who dodges out the axe there. Sanford Soccer maybe sensing a chance to get the early kill of this game. 7 minutes in, no kills on the board just yet. Feels like Sanford Soccer, as you'd expect on this Robin, the one who's putting out a lot of pressure onto the map now, just showing his face on one side or the other. Johnny's going to do the same over here on the right-hand side. Blue buff close to respawning. Jade Dragons peaked at maybe an invade the last time the blue buff was up, but remains to be seen if they're going to try to do so here as well. 65 or 55 player damage, rather, for this Gilgamesh 7 minutes in. So really hasn't had that fight mentality just yet, but Aggro might have to here if this blue buff invade's coming through.
Fine, okay, so use that ultimate just to create pressure, and Hurrywin should be able to follow this pretty quickly. Really the Dragon's first opportunity to get a lead in this game.
Sanford Soccer is going to disengage here as the transformation over from Raffer, and a rip-tide away from PBM as well. Blue buff still up and ready, and the Jade Dragons re-collapse on in. Sanford Soccer is blinked forward, but he's caught a stun from Raffer on the backsides. Winds of Shamash swirl on through on the blue buff, and Sanford Soccer's the first one to go down in this fight. Brought to you by Zeros from the mid lane. World Weaver connects with this target. First blood to the Valkyries.
Sam just either not patient enough with the overhead kick, doesn't use that to immune the damage in the stun, or just was hoping that someone would body block it, but Mike was just in a weird spot. Sam kind of ults out and puts himself in a position where no one can body block it from that position. And going into those sorts of fights, you have to understand that World Weaver, it's not that Zeros isn't there. It's not that we can, oh, it's a 4-on-4 or a 3-on-3. We know, as you're about to go into a fight, a lot of times you'll do your mental calculus on how much damage you're going to need to be taking and how much burst you could potentially take. You should be factoring World Weaver in to those calculations, and it looks like the Jade Dragons thought they had it planned out, but ultimately then dropped on the execution whenever it came time to actually execute.
It's a stun over onto Panda Cat, and half of his HP now missing. And Aggro, we haven't really gotten to dissect what has happened with Hunter builds here. Obviously, a lot of tweaks in recent patches to some of the starter items in that lane. The Wind Demon received a slight nerf there as well. Panda Cat going 0 for 2 on what we're used to seeing out of Hunters. No Arrow starter item and no Devo's Gauntlet first overall. Panda Cat opting for the Bluestone Pendant right into that Transcendence. Looking for a little stacking ability damage maybe out of the Heimdall.
Very surprised to see Bluestone as the pickup for Panda Cat. Not that Heim doesn't leverage the proc well. I mean, he's got his 1 and his 2. Both of those clear the wave pretty well. You could be aggressive to use them to poke, things of that nature. But I would have expected Death Toll for sure on Heim,
right,
who has historically done very well with that extra sustain. He has good scaling, so the Transcendence makes sense to me in that regard.
Johnny looking for an engage, and instead he'll get riptided through. It's the Gilgamesh ultimate that separates out this fight, and Final K collapses, and Gilgamesh is down for the first time this game. Final K strikes Pater 10 minutes in. Panda Cat elsewhere. He's got a solo kill on the left-hand side. Raffer's able to trade one back. Sam now 0 for 2 here in this game. Jade Dragons not satisfied. They're on the chase.
And Fine's got the perfect angle. He's going to choose Ducky. With that 72 transformations, it seems
What's
like
going on?
Easier option, and Panda Cat stuck around. He was at a sliver of HP on that left-hand side of the map. And with that World Weaver up, I think it's fair. I bet you Panda assumed that Zeros had used it in that team fight on the right-hand side, and maybe a bit of a mistake in order to assume that. But I think a fair assumption at the same time that the Neath would use her global ultimate in a good engagement like that. Turns out, Zero's held it to the right moment. He grabbed himself a second kill without ever leaving the lane.
A lot shakes out there in a small skirmish. About 10 minutes into this game, Valhalla Valkyries still nursing just a few hundred gold lead now for themselves, but Zero's feels like he's just had infinitely more impact than the Soul has so far, at least outside of the lane. Hurriedwin's had to stick around here, rotated over, grabbed an assist in that small fight, but the World Weavers have just made all that difference. We are going to get a glimpse at exactly what happened over there, and looks like just an easy 1v1 here for Panda Cat. You might not think it's an easy 1v1 though, Aggro. He ate a little bit more than half of his HP, but what a use of the ultimate there, the knockback. It's near perfect from Panda.
Yeah, and just good patience here from Zeros, just waiting and knowing that if Panda shows up, he's dead no matter what. No way this can get body blocked on the other side of the map. Good fight there from Panda Cat. ML just barely ended up losing it. Got to give credit to ML as well. I mean, he's looking comfortable as ever on this Chronos pick, as we'd expect for a guy who has a skin in the game based on his play on this particular god. Love the Chiron's coin pickup. There's another item that got buffed recently. It's a lot cheaper now. It feels really good as a second item. It's still not your best power spike ever. You know, it's not the Spear of the Magus of old or the Rod of Tahuti Rush that we saw at the beginning of this year. Those felt better as second items, but this smooths your power curve out nicely.
It does. Panda Cat looks for blood. One more time, World Weaver flies in, connects onto Panda Cat. That'll give Sam for Soccer an easy kill. So now the Robin finally into the kill column. Sam for Soccer's been there for all the fights, but has largely been the target of the Valhalla Valkyries. So getting some extra gold, a little experience in the back pocket of this Robin certainly feels good for Sam for Soccer up to this point. Zero's attempted to help out there, but now tough sledding for Emilito. You get the Chiron's coin a little bit earlier, but haven't found the stacks just yet. Zero's plenty of HP now missing. Uses the beads. PBM wants more, though. Johnny does not. He'll jump out beneath the Tier 1 tower and will be the Yamoja kill. Not just yet. The auto's just a little bit short. It looks like Aggro, the pathing might just be enough here, and Johnny could survive, but look out for Fine OK trying to close that gap.
Yeah, really good hiding spot here from Johnny. Just too much tunnel vision there by PBM. He was really trying to solo out Zeros, and he would have had to land everything, but he had a Sunder up. So as soon as that stun lands, if he got it underneath that River's Rebuke, it's Sunder into more bubbles, and that probably would have been a solo kill, but certainly should have just turned around and gotten the easy kill onto Johnny. The Valkyries should feel very fortunate that they walk away from that, not losing a member, just losing a couple of relics.
Yep.
But I think you're starting to see the potency of this soul already from Hurriedwind. One Stellar Burst ended up chunking out a third, a quarter, more than a quarter easily of Zeros' HP alongside that red buff. that Magus proc feels so good on Soul. It just lets her all in perfectly.
Ducky getting chased down just a bit by Fino. Okay, here, this is a winning fight if Fino can find a collapse. Some lifesteal, though, from Ducky will keep him in this fight a little bit longer. Fino, okay, uses his blink to close that gap, but Somersault Cloud will keep the Sun Wukong alive in lane. That's some of the survivability you talk about there. Bluestone still for both of the solo laners here, aggro. And it's a good time to look at the nice enhanced buff graphics we got going on either side there. Enhanced blue, enhanced speed, enhanced purple for Emilito. So that's nice to be able to see. I actually, full on honesty, didn't know that was getting added. So a little surprise here for you and I on the graphics. And you love to see it. It keeps track of where those enhanced buffs are going. But without the Scorpion, which provides some of those enhanced buffs, Gold Fury is spawned. And the Jade Dragons have their eye on that prize.
Good root onto Mike, and now they're really heavy committing onto this Yamoja, and it might just work out.
Panda Cat finds the opening kill, and Johnny finds the second one apiece as we brawl over the Gold Fury, but Raffer too low to re-engage. Panda Cat low as well. And it looks like support from mid is what we've got here. Jade Dragons may be feeling a little bit more confident in the way that trade has gone for themselves, especially if Raffer gets caught out over here, over on the duo side of the map. Panda Cat will collapse with Sanford Soccer, and one more kill over to the Jade Dragons. Emilito trying to duel out here. Does not have the ultimate either. So if there's some CC, Emilito certainly feeling uncomfortable, but the Chronos will survive.
Yeah, it's just an unfortunate situation here for the Valkyries, and that the solo kill that went Panda Cat's way was so close. One auto attack was the difference.
Yeah.
And it's really just opened the game up for the Jade Dragons because Panda has leveraged this lead perfectly. They kill Emil again off respawn as soon as he comes back. That's really the what makes it so difficult whenever you start to fall behind. It's not that first death. It's the fact that you respawn and then you only get a half a wave, a full wave maybe, and then you're instantly on respawn timer again, and that really starts to snowball these leads. And the Jade Dragons really played around that nicely. They know that they can leave Final KO out on the island over here. He's up 2 levels over Ducky somehow. I have no idea how he's managed to kind of pull that lead out of his hat. But the side lanes now for the Dragons are starting to surge forward. They're each up 2 levels. And the Valkyries' composition isn't necessarily built to fight through mid 3v3. You want to use that global ultimate elsewhere. A bit of an awkward spot now for the Valkyries.
They feel comfortable, not awkward around the Pyromancer, and they'll grab the objective. Raffer slowed and quite low here. Tanked up most of the incoming damage there for the Jade Dragons, and if he survives, he's been able to do his job, and Raffer has. So, a nice objective pullback there for the Valhalla Valkyries. If they're able to stay alive cleanly here, Hurrywind is going to weave some damage in over onto Zero. Sanford Soccer lurking close by as well. Might just have to forfeit this one. Raffer's had to go back to base, but Zero's tanks up a little bit of damage, and the Jade Dragons, they'll combine, they'll group up, and they'll push down Tier 1 tower there in the mid lane. And this is what Final K looks like he's been doing over here. He's found a little bit of extra pressure, gets aggressive, but there's no chance Panda Cat survives from this one, right? No way. Emilito gets some help from his jungler and from the mid lane, and he'll get himself on the board.
Yeah, very surprised to see Panda Cat use the Aegis in that spot. That was ambitious is being generous with that Aegis usage. Definitely not what he needed to do. No way he survives with the pathing there from Johnny. And despite that early lead over here in duo, Emilito is going to catch up pretty quickly. These waves scale in XP really, really hard. So you can get back into it fairly quickly.
Fine, okay. Engages onto Zeros. He uses the beads. Then has to use the somersault to stay alive. Look at Johnny, he's scrapping in the backline, but he's all alone. Ultimate from Hurrywind fires down, and Johnny takes a seat, but now the rest of the Jade Dragons sensing an advantage. They'll surge forward here. Raffer and Emilito find some safety in the Tier 2 tower over in mid, and the Jade Dragons, they'll find a clean pick.
Love that use of the ultimate from Hurrywind. You're starting to see how much damage this soul can put out, and she's not even close to done in the scaling department. Don't forget that it really is the case for both teams. They've got the 2 best tower killers in the game in Soul and Chronos. No one shreds towers like these 2. So you can end up in a position as either side where if that player, either Hurrywind or Emilito, survives a team fight, even if they don't get something like a Fire Giant, they could easily get a lot of towers off the map.
Speaking of Fire Giant aggro, the Valhalla Valkyries think that they've got a chance to do this one. Fine, okay, stunned down. The King Arthur likely to fall here, and Zero's just the one who picks up the kill. Plenty of AoE there for this Neath to grab one over the wall. Valhalla Valkyries were confident doing that one aggro. It seemed like the Jade Dragons had gone back. The Valkyries read it well, started up the FG. So Fine OK trades his life to keep the Fire Giant on the map.
Love the play, though, from the Valkyries. And this is where, you know, their early game struggles, we're out of that part of the game. We're into the team fighting phase, and they've shown that you have to give them a lot of respect in these sorts of moments. The Dragons certainly have earned that as well. I'm excited to see what happens.
Oh, be careful, Valkyries. You're a man down, but PBM TKO'd from this fight. He'll have to escape on the back line. Nobody's gotten the kill just yet, but Ducky will leap on down and do so. Sanford Soccer 2v1 over here in the mid lane. He'll win one of those kills. Raffer probably has enough damage to grab this one on the back end. Sanford Soccer agrees, so he'll find the route. Try to find an escape route, but the Dragons, they've lost a couple elsewhere in this fight. Hurrywind has died as well. PBM died earlier on. It's a 2-for-1. The Valkyries come out ahead.
I'm surprised. I don't know how Hurry died. I was so focused on what Sam was doing in the mid lane. Hurry dies with both relics up, and that just can't happen, especially when you're building so much lifesteal. That's one of the big keys to lifesteal, is that you can take a greedy or Aegis. You can play a little bit more in their face, and then be able to turn those plays around. So dying with both of them up, he must have gotten really bursted out of nowhere from the Valkyries, but they don't really have that much burst, Dave. They kind of do their damage over time. You should be able to use your relics up against what Kronos is going to be able to do to you the vast majority of the time. The Valkyries make it work, man. They keep just hitting who's in front of them. They keep killing Fine OK and PBM. They're not being greedy with how these engages are going. It's Neath root into Fafnir hammer, into damage from Johnny, into Emilito stun, into death for these frontliners. And when you're up against hybrid damage like this, auto attackers of both magical and physical, it's hard to itemize against. It's not a whole lot of crit. Zeros is starting to go that way. So you could go Spectral if you wanted, but that doesn't help you at all against what Emilito's doing. You could go something like Midgardian Mail to try and slow down Emilito's attack speed whenever he hits you, but it's no magical protection. And if you're going for magical protection items up against what Emilito's throwing at you, then Zeros is going to chew you up. These types of compositions are very difficult to play around because it's hard to itemize against, and you can't give them too much space because they burn objectives very, very well with the back.
Sanford Soccer's found some damage over here onto Raffer. Fafnir, half HP now as the Oni Fury respawns. With that fight, Valhalla Valkyries find themselves just shy of 2,000, maybe just over 2,000 rather, gold in the lead of this game. They're in the driver's seat, but might not be if Emilito can't survive. Winds of Samash fly on through from Johnny here, and he'll dunk down into the backline. Sanford Soccer now overextended, chased down. Emilito on a killing spree after the way that this game had started for the Kronos. And watch the Valkyries run forth and watch the Dragons run away. PBM uses Riptide, but it's not going to be far enough. Big time lockdown, and Zeros picks up the second.
Man, the way the Valkyries are playing is just so clean right now. They're just picking apart the Jade Dragons and waiting for the Dragons to be the one to make the mistake. Sam gambles his life on getting the kill on Emilito before Rewind goes off, and it did not come up his way. You know he's dead as soon as that happens, and it's just good relic usage on the way out from Emilito. Make sure that he doesn't get traded and allows him to keep pressure on this FG.
It's going to be the FG on over to the Valhalla Valkyries. Oni Fury taken by the Jade Dragons, so a consolation prize to the Dragons to weather maybe a bit of the storm. I mean, these Oni waves are going to absolutely melt once the Valkyries group up and decide which lane they want to push in on here. Raffer been able to stay alive in a lot of these engagements. Only one death so far for the Fafnir, despite plenty of damage being poked in onto him. In aggro now, it's, you know, back-to-back sets where it feels like the Dragons, who are so comfortable so often in this early game, you know, have just kind of let these types of games slip away from them. And you have to give credit to the Valkyries as well, as you did. You already gave them credit on how well they're playing. But this is the game where you thought the Jade Dragons were going to be able to take a step back, take a deep breath after a couple back-to-back losses, and really surge back into Season 8 here in the SPL, but the Valkyries have had complete control.
Yeah, I just think that the Dragons seem to have lost their appetite a little bit for these early game invades. I mean, they've got guaranteed pressure in duo, and is a World Weaver really scaring you enough to not go for a single purple invade past the first? There was one blue buff invade that they get Raffer's ultimate and they go, okay, that's good enough. You know, that's a win. We take that. But that's not a big enough win with how well the Valkyries scale. It's not like the Dragons can't win come late game. I think their team composition scales very well as well, but I think they could have pushed that lead much better than they did. And it feels like their play style, you know, their identity as a team was, we're going to punish you if you don't pick and play around us early. And I don't think the Valkyries necessarily picked around them early well enough to earn how easy this early game was for them. They played around it well. They did pick around it. I think the Neath pick makes sense. I think the Gilgamesh pick works in that way as well. I'm not trying to take credit away from them, but I don't think the Jade Dragons, when they're playing at their best, really are that concerned with that.
Right.
Because they still had a Chronos ADC. I'm just surprised.
Well, it's a long game and a long set. So this game not over, this set definitely not over. If the Jade Dragons find their footing yet again, Hurrywin finds himself a couple levels down, only affecting 3 of the 7 kills that the Jade Dragons have, which is surprising considering how much damage Hurrywin had been able to do early on in this game. World Weaver finds Pandacat. Emilito walks in forward, uses his ultimate to escape the onslaught, but Zeros can't do the same. Final K has found the Neath, and Zeros has to leave the engagement. On the right-hand side, Sanford Soccer's beating Ducky in a 1v1. And so that was the chance the Valkyries thought they had. They use 4 of their ultimates, but find nothing.
Still have Raffer's ultimate, and that's maybe the most important one for this siege. Johnny losing that ult is a big deal. But Sam uses his, Mike uses his. It's not all bad here for the Valks.
Here we go, over in the mid lane, Ducky putting all of his damage into the Phoenix. Looks like he might be able to get it done here. But the Jade Dragons putting up a defense on the left-hand side. They found some damage, but Johnny's done the same. Hurrywind's gone, but Johnny, he can say the same for the Gilgamesh Rapper. Has to transform back, and it's a double kill for Pandacat. He's gone, no crit, but the attack speed doing him plenty of damage. Emilito walking away, Sanford Soccer chasing him down. This is a fight that the Jade Dragons happy to take, but look at the Valkyries. They backpedaled, they turned around the damage, and it's PBM and Sam limping away from the fight.
Oh no, they don't kill Emilito either. That should be it, Dave, because Sam can't close the deal on the damage to Emilito. Between the regen for the Fire Giant and Kronos' kit, I think the Valkyries are going to take game 1.
They're going to walk on into the Titan room, that's for sure. PBM is full HP, does not have the Rivers Rebuke just yet. Hurrywind is up in 8 seconds, but Hurrywind won't have the 8 seconds. The Dragons won't have the 8 seconds, and the Valhalla Valkyries will have game number 1.
Impressive from the Valkyries. I mean, I think that Hurrywin has had trouble surviving in these team fights. Ends up getting dove by Johnny, and whether or not it was a miscommunication between Hurry and Pandacat on who's dealing the damage there and who, if he needed peel, it just took a little bit too long to DPS that Gilgamesh, and Johnny does his job. He created a ton of space in that game. Didn't have the highlight, you know, drop kick one god into the next to smash their heads together and get the big stun, but still did his job really well. What happened to the Dragons, bro? This has not been their performance like we saw at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, there's a world. We've discussed this as a caster team. I imagine as the scenarios play out, there's all these tiebreaker scenarios that could happen later on. Relied on the Dragons being able to find a win here. And again, I said it's a long set. There's still a couple more games to be played. One more at least. But if the Valkyries bring the same heat they did here in game 1, could be another 2-0. Facing the Jade Dragons. Valkyries just shy of 30 minutes, or at 30 minutes, somewhere around there. They'll take game 1. We'll take a break and be right back for game 2.
Hey there, Smite fans, Aggro here. Look, every single year, the SPL just keeps getting better. Season 7 was incredible, and in Season 8, I'm sure our players are going to take their game to the next level. But in order to do that, they're going to need the best gear they can get their hands on. And that's why I'm so excited to announce the title sponsor for Season 8 of the SPL is Alienware. Yeah, that Alienware. Our players are getting the best of the best in computer gaming. These Alienware Aurora Ryzen Edition PC setups are insane. Not only will these be the PCs that the players will compete on once we are in studio, but Alienware is also providing one for each player at their home setup to make sure their practice is as good as possible. Now let's get down to brass tacks. The specs on these Alienware Aurora Ryzen Edition desktops are amazing. An AMD Ryzen 9 16-core processor.
That's a lot of cores.
That's plenty of processing power.
Plenty of cores.
If you want to stream, this is the way to go.
I know a lot about my cores, so. I mean, Pilates, right?
64 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM.
What? Is that true?
That is true.
I mean, this thing has 64 gigs of DDR4 RAM.
Which you can do literally anything with.
Literally anything.
I've never had more than 16 gigs.
That's quadruple the amount I have at home.
And one of the hottest commodities in the PC world, an NVIDIA GeForce 3090 graphics card.
Insane how much better this is than what I have.
The best graphics you really need, Ultra, of course.
Content's gonna look good.
What's the point of all the power if you can't see it? Players will also be using the Alienware 25-inch 240 Hz monitors.
Man, when I load into scrims with this bad boy, I'm gonna feed so hard. And it's gonna be in perfect picture quality.
We are so excited to be partnering with Alienware for Season 8 of the Smite Pro League. And the best part is, this VIP treatment, it's not just for the pros. You too can get the best possible Smite experience. Just go to smitegame.com/Alienware and use code SMITEAW to get special discounts on some of Alienware's best products. Thanks again to Alienware. Make sure you're following them on Twitter and Instagram. That's at Alienware on both platforms. And you can join their community at alienwarearena.com.
And you're telling me an alien wore this?
And as we just said, you know, Alienware, the title sponsor, thank you so much for coming along, Alienware. Obviously, the equipment's great, but it's not good enough to make the Dragons win today, clearly is what's going on with how Valkyries played. But make sure you check out smitegame.com/Alienware, and there's also a discount code of SMITEAW for special discounts available through Alienware. Thanks again for them coming on board. But turning our attention then back towards what's going on here today. Valkyries up against the Dragons Gore, and holy moly, nearly said a bad word then already, but holy moly, we already saw Valkyries just take down the Dragons in that first game. It was a back and forth encounter in the early game. However, they played to their strengths there, I felt like, from the Valkyries' point of view.
And I think that's exactly the way to look at it, right? I mean, Emeludo's literally playing a god with a skin for him. What he did on Kronos in the past, he's still capable of, apparently, in Season 8. And this is in a meta where Kronos hasn't been great. I mean, we have seen no magical carries up until today. I mean, Kronos every now and then, but he's been picked up in mid, mainly for zeros here more than anybody. And so that Neath combo worked out really well. And, I mean, let's face it, early on, like, I mean, we had highlighted it. Like, it wasn't going to be a good game for him, and it wasn't. Early on, he got the hands given to him by Bandicat. He got soloed in lane at one point, was only taken down by that World Weaver that came through across the other side to kill off Bandicat there. So there were a lot of moments early on where it wasn't what they needed it to be. But I actually think this was one of those moments, 19 minutes in, they get this kill on the Finoke. That gave a lot of pressure to the Valkyries that they didn't really have before that moment. And that really allowed Emilito to start getting aggressive and kind of showcase what he was capable of, put him in a good position to fight. And it feels like they just got picked apart from that point forward on the Dragons. 19 minutes on, the Valkyries were really driving everything home.
They really were, and like honestly, I felt like the Dragons were doing what we've seen them do before, where they try and pick apart teams, but when it came to the team fights, they were very sporadic, whereas it felt for my liking that the Valkyries were very dialed in. I mean, they hit a Fafnir hammer, and whoever gets hit by the Fafnir hammer, they focus on the entire way, whereas Dragons were kind of a little bit more aloof, in my opinion. Like, they just weren't playing as a unit almost in that game, very, very discombobulated, so I'm kind of hoping to see some changes for Game 2 here. I don't think picks and bans went badly for them, though, Gore, but I do feel maybe that Neath Kronos pickup kind of swayed the difference and they just weren't prepared for it.
And it's one of those things that I honestly think Kronos is one of those picks I wouldn't be surprised to see Emilito go back to. It's a little difficult to fit into picks and bans, though. They picked him next to last on their team, right? He was, number 8 out of all of the picks that could come through. And it's because that way it limits severely what the Dragons can do to try and lock in to control the Kronos a little better. But do you ban him early on? I don't think you go that far. And that's kind of where things start to fall apart, is looking at those little moments where it's just like, how do you deal with this Kronos? I'd replace it with the Chang'e in the second half, but there's a good chance the Valkyries try to grab it a little earlier on. This Neath, like you had said, is also something that needs to be dealt with. And they had said it on the cast, and I think we need to say it here. Johnny didn't necessarily get the highlight reel, right? You're not getting a montage out of what we just saw.
That's true.
But you are going to be able to get a very adept Gilgamesh. I think he's going to end up potentially taking one of those spots away, or the Dragons, maybe because they just lost, opting for first pick, forcing the Valkyries into the awkward decision of whether or not to ban him.
Definitely, and when you look at the Dragons too, from my point of view, I think the best player on that team that game was Pandacat. I mean, he was the one that stood out for me as like trying to make an impact in the game. Like you said, finding a couple of solo kills. Rest of the team, though, a little bit lost, in my opinion. I don't think we saw the best out of Mike or Sam there, although Sam did get close to a couple of kills, but the Chronos baits, the underhand tactics of, not being able to use your auto attacks really came into play. Wonder what happens in Game 2 then. Will we see a change in the picks and bans? And here we go. Whose first pick is the question? It'll be Valkyries one more time. Do we see the same bans you expect, Gore?
I think the Valkyries don't have much to change on her. Tiamat, Yanis for the top 3, all pretty good. Like, Tiamat is maybe the one you could swing around, but it goes down to what they want to prioritize, right? Do they want Gilgamesh? Do they want Tiamat? And based on what we've seen, Xerus is Tiamat. Throw that one out the window. Go for the Gilgamesh. It worked out really well for you in that last game. It also forces the Dragons to change how they approach this matchup and whether or not you're going to get Athena. Well, not anymore. Sobek, Jingwei, both of those were banned away last time. A lot of things that were open or were closed off are now going to be open.
Well, that's the change up there. Neath now pit banned away by Dragons. They don't want to deal with that in the mid lane again. There may be some changes then. Will we see the Gilgamesh pick up here for the Valkyries? If they do, though, King Arthur's available. No Sun Wukong to deal with that in lane anymore. And obviously, if they go with the Sol option, that's my question now. Do Valkyries go for the Sol themselves? Do they go for the Gilgamesh? They seem to be the two that are on my mind at the moment.
Yeah, a lot that really is going to just fit to their style. I think Gilgamesh, just because of precedence, like, if Johnny's going to have a good game with him, I don't want to see what Sam can do with him, right? And so I think this is going to work out really well for the Valkyries. It also goes worth noting, I mean, I had mentioned like the King Arthur nerf, but it wasn't a big nerf in comparison. I mean, it was like 6% mitigations down to 4% max now that he's going to be able to get. And yet we didn't really get to see a performance out of Finoke that we're really used to seeing here. Ducky got to really run the show over there because of it. Maybe not for the first few minutes, but after a while, he was more and more the solo laner that we got to see having the impact. And so this switch over to the Kukulkan, I think maybe essential here for the Dragons to make things work out for him, but it also leaves a lot of high-tier picks open and available here for Ducky to go to maybe try and handle it a little bit better.
Well, you see Fafnir picked up for Polar Bear Mike there this time round, so Fafnir back in the meta, lock him in if you want to. I don't want him in my ranked games, though, because most people miss hammers all the time. Will Mike have that issue? We'll find out in this one. But he's going to be up against the Sobek and Kronos again. I will say at this very stage, though, Kronos is probably a little bit more flexible, although when you've got a Melito on the team, you're probably going to see that. But that Chiron here as well, Gore. There's been a lot of talk of Chiron is... well, been circulating around a little bit now. People starting to realize that he's very potent and also received some buffs recently too.
There's so much to talk about in these top 6. There's just so many good things. I'm sad because we're missing Ymir just because of the nerfs he got, but Chiron, this big buff that he just got, immune to knock up now when he's in his dash. It's one of those things that when you think about that, if you read that line, it doesn't sound like it's going to be a big deal. But all of a sudden, you see that coming into play. You don't realize like how many things have those knockups until you're immune to them and you're running through them. I think this is going to be a good pickup. The question I really have, though, is whether or not it's going to be Pandacat or Heroine. Again, like the last few times I personally recall seeing a lot of Chiron, he was a mid laner. Like people liked playing him there more than they liked playing him over in the duo lane. And that, again, is such a good pick for their top 3 right at the very end. Because if you ban away mages, well, maybe they just pivot him into the mid lane, they picked up something from Pandacat. You ban away hunters, they do the exact opposite. They have all these mages available. And so it's going to maybe force the Valkyries into jungle bans, and that doesn't hurt Sam as much as you'd like.
Yeah, and obviously with the changes to Chiron too, I think his lane pressure just increases a little bit more with Fafnir alongside him. I will lean on the side of Dragons, taking lane pressure with a Kronos in that lane to begin things off. But as you can see from the counterbands coming through now from Dragons, they continue to focus a little bit more on Ducky, with Sun Wukong banned away and now King Arthur. We're going to have to see Ducky go a little bit deeper in the God pool. Osiris isn't the worst call in the world at the moment, but there's definitely other options available there too. Where does Valkyries go, though? Take away, one more time, Sam Fasaka's a wheelish. They don't want to deal with that. And it will be the Circuit alongside it who's seen a bit of love lately, too.
Yeah, it's the same 5 bands, like all of them from top to bottom here on the side of the Valkyries, which, again, all 5 of them fit what the Dragons have been able to draft in and kind of control them down. But it is going to be interesting, specifically coming into this, not having the Neath here for Gilgamesh is going to open up the conversation for who's going to be the kind of setup or maybe the carry that helps keep people locked down, helps find those kills after Kronos gets soloed in lane in the first 10 minutes, helps lock someone down for Gilgamesh or Tsukuyomi to get some of these kills.
Okay, well, hold up, because Tsukuyomi being locked in tells me jungler, first of all, which means Gilgamesh will not be in the jungle this game. And with Sobek locked in, this could be a flex pick solo. Sobek solo, I believe, is what we may see here, unless Gilga's matchup against Kukulkan is strong. I don't think it is, personally. We'll see how this one plays out, because the Mercury now locked in too. We were talking about jungle changes. We were talking about shell nerfs having an impact, and this might just be one of them too. Rama for mid or Rama for duo lane is my real question, Gore, for you, first of all. Where do you think?
Man, taking Imolito after the performance he just had off of the Kronos seems like a bad idea, but throwing Rom into the mid lane, I guess up against something, well, against the Soul potentially here, could help him out. I don't know. That one's a real toss-up. Zeros likes playing this Kronos.
It is.
And so it's going to be, honestly, I kind of feel, honestly, if Imolito doesn't have the Kronos, I think I do lean towards the Dragons here. I think you send that over to the duo lane, let him have it, kind of understand that he's going to just get beat up in lane and it'll be fine. But you do have to factor things in. Late game Kronos is what we were really talking about, I think was the big point of game number 1. Once he got to that level 20 mark, once he had some items online, he just absolutely ran the show. Mercury and theoretically Soul with the right build can keep up with that, but Mercury even more so. Crit right now is really good. Won't be surprising to see him get like a Wind Demon, to see him get the Deathbringer, obviously, like those really, really strong late game crit items. And without Shell, Kronos, Tsukuyomi, Rom, those are going to be some pretty easy targets for Mercury to 2 to 3 tap, and I think it's going to give a lot of pressure onto Sam to perform because he's the carry for this team, but also a really good avenue for the Dragons to fight back in a place where they couldn't last game.
Let's be honest, I mean, when you look at the composition Jade Dragons have got here, that Coerce from Fafnir too, every single one of those gods that's drafted makes good use of that Coerce, the attack speed buff, the extra damage that's going to come from that. Very, very impactful, so just keep an eye on those Fafnir transformations, those group Coerces. Objectives could go down very quickly in these engagements at Golf and Fire Giant if they're left alone for a moment. And I think that was one of the reasons we saw Fine OK last game be around that Fire Giant as early, because they were worried about that there too. Survivability, though, on Valkyries, I would say isn't too bad, though, because if they do get all in, they've got a few ways to, navigate that. The rewind from Kronos, Rama to the sky just to get out of combat, too. But the same can be said for Dragons, Souls Disapparate on top of Chiron. He can use his ultimate to buy himself a bit more time, maybe even revive, too. I'm excited about this one, but the way the Dragons played game 1, I'm kind of leaning Valkyries right now.
Yeah, their team, I think this is kind of showcasing, if you look at it, you go back to the last week of the Dragons, you say, well, they lost to the Bolts, and then you go, well, the Bolts are a decent enough team. Like, if Lasber shows up, that team, of course they're going to be able to find wins. They lose to the Scarabs, and you go, well, the Scarabs just played that set really well. Like, there's no way to gloss over that. Scarabs played those last 2 games incredibly well. The first game, they had a lot of kills, but maybe weren't able to get a lot of objectives where the Dragons still had control. But now you're starting to look at it as, okay, maybe we can't make up more excuses for the Dragons. Maybe it's not just these teams are playing well. I think that is a factor, but I think that the Dragons are definitely slipping up a little bit. This is the time to plant their heels in and start to push back, because if they go down to the Valkyries, I mean, we're talking about, oh, hey, we're 3-way tie for second. We're starting to talk about the Dragons not even being in that conversation anymore, and that seems outlandish compared to the first half of the phase we had.
Well, take it to Macau as well. In this one as well. Crit is a big thing. You mentioned it a little bit earlier on. Very squishy compositions here. Not a whole lot of tankiness on these two sides. Will we see a bit of tankiness come through, or will Crit rule the day, I want to say here? Expect people to be bursted down quickly. And with that, it's time to get into game. Can Valkyries close this out 2-0, or are Dragons going to battle back?
I almost can't believe Hindu Man just said that. Valhalla Valkyries 1 game away from taking this set over the Jade Dragons, who have to bounce back here and then as well in game 3. So a hill to climb to be sure for this Dragon squad. 5-man grouping on the left-hand side. That'll get spotted out by Zero, so no real kill pressure right off the bat. Still Dolson, still aggro, still Doug. For game number 2, lots of pivots to look towards here, aggro. The one that stands out to me that's not a pivot is still Emilito on the Kronos and Johnny over on that Gilgamesh. Zeros gives himself some disengage, and I think that's an important thing that Hindu Man brought up there in the death segment. The abilities for the Valkyries to kind of back away from these fights and then re-engage, should they choose, is going to be important, and that's going to be something difficult for the Dragons to deal with.
They certainly have that option, but I do think that the early game for the Valkyries is just worse than it was in game number 1. Zeros is going to have a much harder time being impactful on these side lane fights on something like the ROM in comparison to that Neath. The Dragons have to take advantage of that. They should have pressure in duo for sure.
Whoa, it's big damage over onto Emilito. It's a double stun from the Kronos, and I think that might have just saved Emilito's life just now. But that was some early damage, admittedly, that I was not expecting at the moment. Beads used, though, by Emilito. Polar Bear Mike on this, Fafnir, excuse me, if he's able to find that stun. And there's some quick follow-up from Panda Cat, who looks towards the Bluestone yet again here. Could be early kill pressure. Still, as we explained, the Kronos needs a little bit of time. But now without those beads, aggro, a little bit more potent maybe, but PBM uses the Sunder as well, so that definitely factors in.
I just think that once you let this Kronos get too late, there really is a point where it's just too late, because with all the movement speed that ML had, I mean, you saw him kite out Sam really well at the end of the game last time around. You got movement speed from Kronos 2. You got movement speed from Chiron's coin. You got movement speed from Wingblade. You got movement speed from Gem of Focus. It's impossible to lock this guy down. Yep. And he's not sacrificing any damage, basically, by going those, save for the Wingblade pickup. So you feel like you get to a point on this Kronos where it's pretty impossible to die. Dragons have to turn up the gas a little bit before that. I like the Chiron pick against the Kronos quite a bit, especially if Panda thinks that Bluestone's the way. You can do things like that, where no one leverages it better than Chiron. You have all 3 abilities proc it really, really easily. You can afford to play aggressive, and with training exercise as that cleanse, it is impossible to get stunned by this Kronos. That it's too predictable, it's too reactable. I'd expect Panda Cat to actually start maxing Masterful Shot, the second ability, because I think that he's really going to be saving training exercise to allow him to fight aggressively up against the Kronos.
Chiron, knock up immune while he's dashing as well, certainly feels good. Into something like the Sobek here. It's a purple buff invade. Polar Bear Mike will not be successful. Instead, PBM gets plucked right on back through. Emilito just trying to swing away, but there's your early game Chiron damage. They're going to need a little bit extra here. Panda Cat is left. He's on his own purple buff. This is maybe just buying some time for the leap to come off of cooldown, and the Great Escape by PBM is complete.
Wow, Red really shouldn't have got in for that jump. And the Hog Secure was there again from Rapperman. Look at this on the right, Ducky in trouble.
Piercing Moonlight used just to buy a little bit of time, and the root is there from Fine OK, but Ducky with the cow drops down, buys himself enough time for Johnny to re-engage on the fight, the stun into the wall, and Johnny on the board first now for the Valhalla Valkyries. Junglers both over on the solo lane, but it's Johnny who rotates over and finds a kill.
Unfortunate gank not going the Dragon's way. I mean, Sam ends up having to back up because Ducky does so much damage with that Piercing Moonlight. Don't think Ducky got knocked up by Fine OK on that ultimate. And then the fact that Fine misses the push in the transformation, that would have gotten Ducky killed, but the fact that he's let off the hook there, certainly not feeling great for the Dragons.
Well, it's already an immediate difference, isn't it, for Johnny? I mean, I brought up the number 55. That's how much damage he had 7 minutes into game number 1. Now already a kill on the board, higher up in the damage charts. Just the collapse, the kick. Feels good. That's a big, impactful drop kick, and that's some of the fun we were hoping to see with this God pick. And now a little bit of it here already for Johnny out of the jungle. Ties up the kills here. At 1-1, gold still in favor of the Jade Dragon, so not the end-all be-all just yet. But that's tough for Fine OK aggro. I mean, the King Arthur is such a signature pick for this guy. And in game number 1, felt like just kind of melted away into the background. Didn't have that traditional impact from a fine OK King Arthur.
I mean, he was so far ahead in that game, too. I mean,
Right.
he was up 2.5, 3 levels, and still, when it came team fight time, just was not able to survive the onslaught. Speaking of onslaught, ML down 2 levels to Panda Cat on this left-hand side, and this is what we should be seeing more of against this Chronos pick. He shouldn't get a purple for free all game, and this should just be zoning this wave. You don't necessarily have to push this unless you need to reset yourself and go back and get your farm, because Emilito is just in a position where he's dead to any sort of aggressive play for Panda Cat.
Right, can't do much here. Emilito, luckily, able to soak up that wave after the Jade Dragons push it in. I'll have to see what Zeros is able to do. I mean, you mentioned the less immediate impact, maybe, of this ROM. That's very important. Has semi-global, but, you know, you have to aim the snipes, you got to get in range, all those sorts of things. And think about the Neath, whether it was actual physical pressure of the ultimate getting used, or what appeared to be a slight fear from the Jade Dragons in game number 1 of that World Weaver ultimate. Maybe a disrespect from Panda Cat on 1 or 2 occasions, thinking that it had already been used in the rest of that fight. And so now it's how the Valhalla Valkyries can kind of smooth that curve over, because they played around the World Weaver so successfully there in game 1, and maybe it's Johnny picking up a little bit of that pressure early on here into this game. Trying to keep pace with Sam for Soccer, doing a good job of it. Ducky uses the piercing moonlight. Sam for Soccer flies on through, but no connect on the ultimate.
No harm, no foul, I suppose, on that right-hand side. Trading ultimates is good for the Dragons, I think, so you're not feeling horrible about that, even though it did end up going a little bit awry. I think that even beyond that World Weaver conversation, which is certainly critical for Zeros in this matchup, how many fights started with Zeros just hitting a root onto a frontliner and keeping the CC chain going? Stun into root into stun. You just don't have that option at all on ROM. You're CC light.
Left side of the map feels bad for the Valkyries. It's a 2-level lead for PBM, and it's going to get worse here. Hurrywin picks up his first kill of the game. Johnny trying to chase down the mid laner, but Hurrywin disapparates, but reappears on the map, and Zeros finds the final shot, the piercing kill. And Hurrywin goes down. It's a 1-for-1 trade, or 2-for-1, rather, as Johnny had fallen as well as Raffer, and it could be 3. Double kill for Panda Cat. Emilito stuck around just a little bit too long, takes some time to charge up the ult. And the Jade Dragons take control of the left side.
And this feels like what the Jade Dragons typically do. They group up, and they say, all right, we're here. Fight us, please. And Raffer makes the mistake. He plucks Mike. Mike happy to be on the receiving end of it, and just turns and says, we're killing this guy. And if anyone comes to help him, we'll kill them too. And that's exactly what ends up happening. ML just way too far behind to be impactful in this game. Panda Cat on an early game slanted pick that allows him to fight early and has a positive matchup in his lane. Credit to Zeros, man. I mean, hitting those snipes on EU ping, hitting all 3, certainly difficult and impressive, but that's kind of the only silver lining for this early game so far for the Valks.
Well, if it's going to be Chiron's coin again for Emilito here, he's probably feeling pretty thankful that the cost has been decreased just a little bit here. Johnny, over by
he was on a quest,
Dave. Here. He's looking for right?
He was on his quest.
He was on a quest for blood.
No,
That's right. I thought,
for his iron.
Well, maybe he is. Kicks back. Fine, okay here. Johnny salmon leap, or excuse me, fine, okay. Will salmon leap in. Johnny will keep himself alive here. Seems like, though, if you're looking towards the right-hand side of the map, the job now for Fine OK just has to be to stay alive, right? Because this left-hand side is just starting to spiral. Emilito 2 levels down. Raffer 1 to 2 levels down. Mid lane somewhat even. So if the game keeps going this pace for the Jade Dragons on the left-hand side, all Fine OK's got to do is to keep himself in it. 1 more shot from Panda Cat. Of course, he's going to hit that one. 4-0 for the Chiron. 3-level lead. The Jade Dragons continue to find pressure on the left.
And just nothing for free. Nothing for free, including Emilito's life. Gets the beads and the ultimate. And Panda Cat's right here waiting for him. No shot that Emil gets out of it. That's Chiron from ahead damage right there. Valkyries, no response. And what are the Valkyries supposed to do? I mean, probably try and play around Ducky on his right-hand side, send Johnny over, and hope that you can gank the checks notes Cullen with Warrior's Axe and tank boots.
That's easy, right?
Maybe not. Maybe that's not the best option. This is what you want to do against the Chronos composition.
Yeah, now it's 9 minutes, 45 or so seconds into this game. Emilito's still working on that Chiron's coin. Hard to get those stacks when you don't even have the item finished off just yet. Panda Cat fully stacked Transcendence, feeling happy at the state of the game. Emilito knows this one. He knows what's going on here. He doesn't want to walk forward, try to defend that tier 1 tower. Just wasting a little time with the Jade Dragons here. That just feels bad, though, doesn't it? I mean, you just know they're lurking around. You know they're sitting there. And you can't walk forward, absorb any of that XP. It's a small micro moment, but I think mentally that just feels horrible.
Yeah, you just got to take your hands off the mouse and go, all right, I will wait. I will wait until they are no longer on this ward. And even then, I have to be respectful because if they're underneath and by red buff, I'm probably still dead.
You can't even walk around the corner. You just got to absorb the XP as the minions go down, because you have vision over on your purple buff, but you don't have it in the lane outside of just what the minions provide. Now Panda Cat shows his face, so Emilito will stay away. The level discrepancy's gotten worse. 4 levels now. Panda Cat is over Emilito. So it's the scaling discussion comes to mind, and it's about buying time for Emilito, but you're going to need a whole lot of it, even on the God of Time. So that's something we'll have to check in on, and even if we're able to get there, because despite the stumbles, this Jade Dragons team, one of the best in the league, that pushing an early lead. We wondered where the pressure would go then from the Valkyries. Right-hand side was the answer. Piercing Moonlight used. Johnny in as well, and the drop kick sends FidoK stunned against the wall. Good turnaround, a 2v1. FidoK finds it. Everyone else is in, including Sanford Soccer. It's a disastrous gank from the Valhalla Valkyries. They've got to find one here. Zeros is able to get that one, but the Jade Dragons turn around at least 3.
And the Dragons know the playbook, man. They've Bill Belichick the Valhalla Valkyries. They've stolen the playbook, and they know what's coming. They know that it's the right-hand side for FidoK that is the only vulnerable end of the map. They just show up in force. Sam's there right on time to come on through and play Cavalier as the rest of the squad comes in after the fact. Beautiful, beautiful execution by the Dragons.
Well, after this last year, is it Bill Belichicking or Tom Bradying? I don't know. Maybe our question was
It's Belichick. Yeah,
it is Belichick.
Yeah, it's Belichick.
Okay, fair enough. Rapper. We'll try to escape here, but it's a tier 2 tower awaiting him over on the other side. At this point, it's just who gets the kill. It would feel real bad if it were Hurrywind, and it's maybe where this kill ends up going. PBM will snag that one. This one's starting to get just a bit out of control. We're 12.5 minutes into the game. 6,000 gold in the lead are the Jade Dragons. And what feels bad is that kind of felt like the last chance, right, for the Valkyries. Obviously still some game to play. The Titan still stands, as well as 4 towers, 3 Phoenixes. But it felt like that was what the Valkyries were hoping would go right over on the right-hand side. And now it just feels like nothing on this map is going to go right. And you have to pray the Dragons make a mistake.
That seems like the potential out for the Valkyries. I mean, 6K gold at 13 minutes is
very diplomatic.
Astronomical. But I guess it could be worse in XP. Don't look at the duo lane. No one, just keep your eyes a little bit above where the duo lane members are. And otherwise, it's not looking horrible for XP for the Valkyries. I just don't think that they're going to be trying to group up and kill FidoK anytime soon. I think they might have learned their lesson there.
FidoK feeling just fine now after what happened over there on the right hand side. Even before Sanford Soccer came in, FidoK was effectively turning around a 2v1. So bounce back performance at least 14 minutes into the game for FidoK. It's going to be a Pyromancer on over to the Jade Dragons. No reply here from the Valhalla Valkyries, though no reply was expected. And now it's 8,000 in the XP department, and as you pointed out, Aggro, most of that's sitting over in the duo lane. But there is still some pressure over onto FidoK. Johnny will leap on in. FidoK finds the knockup. Piercing Moonlight connects with the Thorns. FidoK transforms, pushes Ducky back in, and FidoK survives. Panda Cat is able to find a kill. Of course he does over onto Emilito. More at 9 on that repeat headline. Ducky is able to find some pressure, though, here on the right-hand side, but FidoK doesn't fully turn around the 2v1, but he survives it.
Man, so close. The fact that everyone's kind of standing there, guns drawn in the 2v1, FineOK still manages to hold them off. Impressive stuff from him, and I thought Johnny played it well. I mean, you want to just wait until you know that he's used that ultimate so that your wins will keep him in and that you can bounce him back, but just too much defense and too much damage coming from Fine.
I get the feeling there's going to be a quick one, unless the rewind gets off.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, blink of an eye. Seems right for Mercury there. Sanford Soccer dashes in, and Panda Cat supplies the damage. 6-0-1 now for Panda Cat, a 5-level lead over on the left. Could be a speedrun type territory here for the Jade Dragons, but with the way aggro their recent games have gone, and I want to give all the credit in the world to the professionalism of these guys, you want to make sure that this game finishes itself off in a very clean manner for the Jade Dragons, not taking any unnecessary risks. Let's group up. Let's find those towers in a methodical way and move ourselves on to Game 3 if we're able to keep doing what we've done so far. And one way to do that is keep putting pressure onto Emilito and Raffer. No chance to survive there. It's an unstoppable Panda Cat 16 minutes into the game.
FineOK, Sam and Hurry looking for zeros in the mid lane, just waiting for their food to drop. That's like everyone standing in line for lunch. It's who's gonna get fed first at that moment. They're all waiting for their opportunity, and zeros on this ROM. Again, think about how this game plays out if zeros is underneath, where Panda Cat gets ahead, and he's playing up on tower lines. How much easier it is to kill him if you just send Johnny over and you hit him with a World Weave. What is he gonna do? He might be fed, but it's pretty hard to get away from that. On the ROM, you just don't have that type of threat on the map. They have similar impact in terms of being able to ult from far away, but really far apart in terms of actual effectiveness of it.
Oh man, Johnny attempts to look towards the FG, but it is already gone, and he accepts his fate there as Hurrywind will pick up the 5th kill of the game now on this Soul. With that FG, it feels like the snowball that was a big rock now officially transforms into a boulder. I don't know what the sizing chart is on rocks, unfortunately, but the snowball has become quite large now as the Fire Giant finds itself around all 5 members of the Jade Dragons. It's almost not even worth looking at. Go ahead. You had. Is this about the boulder chart or
of
something
course,
more statistical?
Why else would I interject, Dave? I believe that we are officially on a small boulder the size of a large boulder territory. I think that's where we are in the rock size.
Is that a tweet from like the Colorado Department of Safety or something like that?
And a fantastic one at that. Yes.
They tweet out. A small boulder the size of a large boulder has found its way onto the roadway, and the Valhalla Valkyries are unfortunately the ones who've put out that tweet here in game number 2. So the Jade Dragons will surge themselves in. It's almost difficult to look at base defense because you're going to need a miracle here. I'm not sure the Phoenix supplies enough support to make up for the gap that is now formed in effectively every lane outside of solo here in this game. 3 levels at least. Literally everywhere except the solo lane. So the Valhalla Valkyries, let's see what they've got in the gas tank. Not much. Raffer down, up into the sky. Goes Zeros, looking for some damage on the snipes. Ducky may be able to get involved in this team fight. Panda Cat survives though, and Ducky will end up getting the kill, but at what cost? Well, it might just be the game. Zeros has to leave. Johnny is lurking in the back as well, and the Phoenix will ultimately fall to the 3 surviving members of the Jade Dragons.
They don't have a wave, so I don't think they can go in towards the Titan.
Oh, this just feels bad, huh?
Not quite going to just win this outright up against Johnny, but he's got help coming.
He sure does. The rest of the team behind the Jade Dragons here, so it's only a matter of time. Oh, PBM gets it done. Sam did nothing there. There, so he'll get an assist because he was close by, but that's really PBM biding his time, grabbing himself a kill on the Valhalla Valkyries jungler. 13 seconds on Panda Cat. And look, aggro, the Valkyries found the backline, right? But Panda Cat was able to stay alive in that ultimate, find some extra damage. The unfortunate fact of the matter is it took literally everything to kill Panda Cat. And that's all you got. You got a death in the death column for Panda Cat, but you've lost your left side of the map. Can't imagine the mid lane or right side Phoenix feels much better to defend here for the Valkyries.
No, I don't think it will. I mean, they just have no wave clear at all. And when you have no wave clear, you can't really defend your Phoenixes particularly well. So you're really looking for those all-ins. Rapper blinked in and created some noise, but ML really couldn't step up and help in any way. He was kind of trapped in a weird spot. Final K was just sitting underneath zeros and waiting for him. ML didn't even feel the need to turn and help in that regard because he knows he's frankly still not very scary in those fights. So yeah, Valkyries just kind of have to sit there and wait for the moment that the Dragons decide they're going to siege again.
I don't know. Maybe it's worth at this point because, although you and I think were casting a game a few weeks ago where it was all but over. And
yeah, it was Titans and Scarabs.
Right. I don't know if the deficit was quite like this. My God, Gore talked about a 2-tap. That's what Zero's nearly faced there. Crit in the build now for Sanford Soccer, so maybe feeling a bit situational on a build of that order. Rapper has to lurk in the waters alone. Nobody else in the fight is able to collapse here. Johnny on the left-hand side opens up the gate. Mid lane Phoenix is gone, but so is the health bar of Ducky, and there wasn't a defense here from the Valhalla Valkyries. They showed their face for a moment, and it looks like in just over 20 minutes, the Jade Dragons will surge on into the base of the Valkyries, and they'll tie up this set.
So they are still in there. The Jade Dragons that we saw the rest of the phase do still exist.
Good Lord.
They remembered what they did, and they came out and they did it in less than 21 minutes to the Valhalla Valkyries. The Valkyries, I think they came in with a strategy that worked really well in game one, but these good teams, you can't just give them look after look after look of the same strategy. They're going to figure out a way to get around it. I'm curious to see what the adjustment's going to be from the Valkyries in game 3 picks and bans, because I think the onus, despite it winning game 1, I think it's really on them to make those adjustments.
I agree. It seemed like the largest adjustment that the Dragons were able to make after game 1 was banning away the Neath. Didn't it? The tide of that game felt different with just one big ban there for the Jade Dragons. In sub 22 minutes, the Jade Dragons will tie up this set. Quick break. Right back with game 3.
Welcome back to the SMITE Pro League, powered by Alienware, and we've just witnessed Dragons stomping. Is the word I would use to describe what happened in that game.
Yep.
And honestly, Gore, it all came through that duo lane. The Chiron pick really ended up making really good work in the early game. Panacat looked great game 1. He continued it into game 2.
Yeah, I think that he, again, on Heimdall, was able to find some good solo kills, didn't necessarily get the late game area and expertise that you would want. This game just ran the show. Look, I mean, we're starting the highlights. He's already 3-0 right here. Like, that should tell you enough. Able to find a lot of it, that long-range ultimate. Had just an insane game, and I think was able to showcase something that I honestly didn't think you could do on Chiron, if I'm being real with you. Like, I've seen a lot of Chiron play, and, like, I mean, you can, realize this as well. We've seen him in the past. I want to say maybe, like, Season 5, Season 6, there was a little bit of a gap for me as elsewhere, but, like, prior to that, he's in mid lane. He does all right. He was never really a hard carry the way that we've seen some of these other hunters really come into fruition. And Panacat just smacked them as hard as he could this game. And he had a lot of help. I mean, Sam, he spent a lot of time in that duo lane. He got some in-lane ganks. Imolito, there was a certain 5-minute period where he could not step past his tier 2 tower without Sam being on top of him.
And that just transitioned the whole map then for Dragons too, because they had that pressure in that dual lane. They started to filter around. He allowed Horrywin some opportunity there, 7-1 and 7 for him on that soul pick in the mid lane, where early game, just very focused on surviving. Honestly, from my point of view, it really came down to that dual lane and that specific matchup of the Fafnir Chiron up against Sobek Kronos. You're going to have a bad time. It kind of showed it there. And I think the biggest change for Panacat and like for Chiron specifically really was the giddy up more than anything else, being a little bit more knock-up immune, having a bit more, ability to use that and chase down targets. It makes it a harder time for some of these more immobile characters that you may play in that carry position. And that's why Emil struggled. It was a 4-5 level lead at one point. And from there, just continued to snowball on. So what changes for Game 3 then for you, Gore? What do we see? Do we see bans at Chiron? Do we see the Kronos not getting picked? I mean, it's kind of what it comes down to, is this mid and hunt to pick specifically.
I think it was a lot of the adjustments that the Dragons made that really hurt the Valkyries, specifically the Neath ban, right? Like, I think this Kronos worked out well because no matter what, he always had someone on the map looking out for him. It didn't matter where the supports were, someone was able to get there. And it also makes sense, like, the Chernobog was banned last game by the Dragons as well towards the end, and it's another one of those things that has stopped someone from being able to constantly go over there and babysit, help this Kronos get to that late game portion. If I'm changing any bans on the side of the Valkyries, I think I'm looking towards Mercury right now, although, again, he's last pick, so maybe you don't focus him early on. Change out the Awelish or the Cirquette maybe for that, and try to figure out a way to get this Kronos into a comfortable position without having to sacrifice everything. I think if the Dragons keep Neath in their first 3, they have to change up what they're playing, probably in mid on the Valkyries, to make sure that Kronos is just able to survive and do the things we saw in Game 1.
Well, as we go into picks and bans for Game 3 now, it appears Valkyries will be first pick again. So both teams decided they're happy with the sides they're on throughout this entire series. For me, though, Goro, so I guess the next question is Fafnir. Fafnir get buffs. Fafnir's played 2 games. Fafnir's won 2 games. Maybe Fafnir's a look to take that away from the other team earlier on. Which the question for Valkyries is, do you go for Gilgamesh again early if it's left up? Or do you take away the Fafnir because that's the most winning god in this set so far?
I mean, that's the key is the fact that it was Kikul and Fafnir last time for the Dragons. The Fafnir was picked up in the 3rd slot there for the Valkyries in game number 1. So, yeah, how much do you value this Gilgamesh, especially because everything does seem to be collapsing around your mid lane right now with Neath being taken out. Unfortunately, that ROM did not at all have the same impact in mid the same way, and admittedly that's kind of something we've seen in the past, right? Neath is a little more ability based than she is auto based, whereas ROM is kind of the opposite, a lot more auto based and auto heavy. And so maybe they just have to switch to another more ability-based hunter. Of course, now that I've said that out loud, my mind's blanking on the other, like, 4. I guess Uller is another one that they could fall back on, who has a consistent stun, and maybe good setup for something like a Gilgamesh, but does still take a little bit of time to get online, doesn't have the global presence, right? So there's always a push and pull and an ebb and flow, and right now it feels like this Neath kind of had the best of everything that the Valkyries needed to cinch this team composition together. And unfortunately, they're going to have to figure it out. And they're going to have to figure it out fast. I'm trying to think of it. They might even need to jump to a mage that's going to be able to bring them some presence in the mid lane just a little bit stronger. Because I don't know if the Hunter is going to be able to pull up the weight that the Kronos is kind of needing.
Well, they love the Gilgamesh, and that's the main thing to keep an eye on there. They're going to go back to it one more time. Gilgamesh, Flavor, and Chiron, now also Flavor of the month too. We'll have to see exactly how this plays out as we see what Valkyries choose to draft against this. I'm expecting more of a traditional hunter potentially this time round here, Gore, too. I don't necessarily believe we're going to see the Chiron get the dual lane against Kronos again, in my opinion.
Well, you had mentioned this Fafnir, and I mean, Fafnir Chiron so far is a winning for combo, right? I mean, 100% it was able to.
Well, it looks like Gore may have taken a little bit of a journey into the Netherrealm for a second or two, so you're just stuck with me. As you can see, it was Chiron and Fafnir locked in, so back across the way, and there's that soul pick a lot earlier this time round from the Valkyries to make sure they take it away from Horrorwind in mid. It's flexible for them, though, in that duo lane, too. We could potentially see Emilito go for that, but it definitely is a tried, true, and tested method of seeing zeros on that in the mid lane. Zero's a big proponent of having these sort of characters that allows him to escape combat very effectively. Disapparate does that for him, as well as Rom with the rollout and also taken to the sky, too. Cucullin, though, locks in 2 now for the Dragons. On top of that, back to that for Fine OK, who had a pretty decent game there for the most part. He struggled a little bit in the early game on the early gank in. However, when he got counter-ganked in a 2v1, he did a pretty good job as well there. Gore, you back with me?
Yes, sir. I couldn't tell you what happened other than VMix hates me, and that's about it. That's pretty much the limit of it.
But yeah, we got the Cucullin locked in now, but it's going to be Fenrir banned away earlier on. Nice little shot from Valkyries there, that Fenrir not waiting for too much pressure potentially from that jungle position where we've seen Sanfasaka take that Fenrir before. But King Arthur and now Chernobog as well banned away from Valkyries. So you can see that the Dragons are expecting a hunter still to come out of this draft from Valkyries, not just this soul pickup.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see what the Valkyries have in mind. I mean, we had mentioned like the Mercury being a problem, at least from what I could see last time. A combination with this Chiron was really good. If this Soul goes to the dual lane, if this is Imolito playing her, which again, right now seems a little outlandish, more realistic last year, then I think this Fenrir makes a lot more sense as a ban. But because of what we saw specifically Sam doing to sit on this Soul and specifically to shut down someone like Imolito, I think that they're maybe trying to flex that around. Dragons in kind of a similar vein. They banned the Chernobog, that global presence, to try and help keep the rotations under control here. But it does open up the conversation, like what Horrorwind wants to play, Soul being stripped from him. Had a really, really good couple of games there no matter what. They're going to go back to the Mercury here. I'm actually really, really excited to see this again because, I mean, you look at it, technically it's just 4/5 of the exact same team. You put the Soul over there, the Dragons are running back exactly what they just had, and they're more than happy to run that. But now you've got a lot of flexibility. Yeah, Yanis is gone, Tiamat is gone, but not a lot of mages have disappeared or been stripped away for Horrorwind. And so I think this is a really good opportunity for the Dragons to do this. I didn't get to say this yet, but that game, again, with 80% of the same comp, 20 minutes, 54 seconds. By a minute and 9 seconds, it was the fastest game that we've had so far this year. And if they can dial that up just another notch, then they're going to be able to find themselves successful here.
And obviously as well, we talked about the Chiron a little bit. This matchup against Jingwei, I mean, I'm excited to see how Jingwei builds this game for Emilito, because we've seen a lot of these Transcendence pickups from Panda Cat so far into the Acid that was recently buffed too. And obviously ability-based hunters is what you were talking about earlier on. Bluestone very effective with them as well. And what will the mid lane pick be? Well, it's Discordia being hovered over right now by the Jade Dragons. Makes a lot of sense for me for a bit more CC. However, maybe they want a bit more survivability with that Merlin, the ability to stay at range and get a lot of poke damage off. I wonder where they're going to go. It will be that Merlin pickup.
And honestly, I actually like this. If you think about it, I want a setup mage. I want someone who's going to be able to get maybe some burn damage, because if Panda plays Chiron the way he just did, you don't need a carry in the mid lane. And with Mercury on your team, you're not necessarily looking for who can we have that has this huge burst, the huge kill potential. You're looking for someone who can set up the people with the huge kill potential. I think Merlin slots into that really well, plus a lot of objective control from the burn that he brings. Alongside things with this Mercury and Chiron, I think it's going to be very difficult in like Gold Fury pits, Fire Giant pits, to fight the Dragons one-on-one, especially with Fafnir and Cucullin that are really being able to play bodyguard for them. Tyr maybe going to be able to help displace some of that front line, maybe a little more setup, but the CC was a little lacking there for the Valkyries in game number 2. It still feels kind of lacking here. They have a little more of it than they had in game 2, but not as much as it felt, at least not as present as in game number 1. And so there's a lot of pressure on their team fight, I think, and as well as this Jingwei, who I will say I think it's 8 games played for them, but has like 2 wins of their 8 games played. So it is not a very successful. It's a 25% win rate pick for the Valkyries that Emilito loves, but hasn't treated them very well. You're going into a game 3. You looked really good in game 1, not so much in game 2. I don't know if this is where I really would start hedging my bets.
Well, I'll just give you guys an update real quick. We're going to have a bit of a remake between the players, the teams, and picks and bans are still the same. Just going to take us a little bit longer to get into game here. But there's a look at Loki Dad, who tweeted us earlier on with his lovely little cup. Let's go Dragons for Panda Cat Horrorwind. It's time to jam. This jam thing, Gore, I don't know how you feel about it, this whole get jammed. Ever since they've started doing that, they started losing. I mean, is that a good idea at that point? You know, like you keep talking about getting jammed. The only ones I've seen getting jammed is them. That's not good, right?
Until you said that, I was going to say it's just good for them to build their brand. But now that you've pointed that out, I think you're 100% on the money.
Is that the Dragon's curse, right? Like, casters have got a curse. Like saying, like, I like how you said last game. I was like, I think Valks are going to win this one. You know? The get jammed thing could come back to haunt them.
And it was right after, I think Mike had even gone on Twitter at one point to specify, he's like, that's a thing that you don't want to get jammed. Of course, there were some people, I will say maybe some thirst tweets out there as well, saying that they did want to get jammed, in fact. But that wasn't the whole point of it. The point was that PBM, and they were trying to highlight that that is a negative connotation. And of course, it has been since that conversation that they have been on the receiving end of it. Again, I said this last game that they needed to dig their heels in. They did that much. I would say they went kind of above and beyond just digging their heels in to turn things around. Now the question is that a one-game performance? Is that like a ghost of the past of what we expect out of the Dragons? Or is that something that they're going to be able to bring consistently? I think if they can play even half as well as last game, they're probably going to be able to find themselves a comfortable lead this time around. So a lot of the pressure falls more to the Valkyries to prove that, you know, maybe, ping diff, something, throw out those words and all that. But that there's going to be something that could really come into their equation to showcase why they are a strong team and someone to be worried about.
Yeah, and let's be fair, I mean, ping diff has been a thing, but at the same time, they won game 1. It's showing that, like, even on the ping, they are still able to compete to an extent there as well. Maybe struggle now and again. Although this composition that the Valkyries have drafted is, we just turn our attention to these drafts, I do feel as the game goes on a little bit here, the scaling factor comes into play. With Jingwei and Sol on board for Valkyries, I'm ever so slightly leaning on their late game, even though there's Mercury and Merlin along the way for Dragons. I just have a feeling that Jingwei does a ton late game, especially with the crit that she's got available to her, and with crit being prevalent in the meta too. We'll see how that works out, especially with a squishier composition. But this is a coin toss for me. I feel it's going to come down to that laning phase in dual lane one more time here, Gore.
And I think that dual lane is going to be prevalent because of the jungle presence. I mean, like I said, Sam's kind of hung out over there a lot of the game. But admittedly, he didn't have as much to worry about. Fine, okay, I'll not even sugarcoat it. He hasn't necessarily had a great set so far. I think he's gotten like 2 kills this entire time. Got a lot more assists last time around, but I think his team was popping off and made him kind of look and feel a little bit better in solo. But he was going up against Tsukuyomi, and theoretically, while that's not necessarily an easy matchup, it wasn't a very difficult matchup for him on the Kukulkan. Now you've got a much tankier presence on the other side in this tier. I'm wondering if, because we spent so much time in the duo lane, maybe this tier is built to be the pillar to kind of counteract it, try and pull Sam specifically away from the Dragons duo lane, make it a little more difficult for Panda Cat to go 7-1-7 or whatever it was, that ridiculous slash line he had, and force Sam to play over in the short lane a little bit more often, deal with this tier. Ideally, you're also saving the Jingwei in the process by alleviating some of the stress that she's going to have to, or alleviating some of the stress that she's going to have to deal with. Maybe the same thing can go for Sol, but to me, it feels like you said, if Sam can get his way, Panda Cat gets his way, we're going to be hanging out in the duo lane, and the Dragons, fingers crossed for them, would have a similar performance. Of course, if you're a Valkyries fan here, this Jingwei, while it hasn't been successful for the Valkyries, you want to be able to find a lot of success. And the one thing that we say about Heimdall, I think doubles as true to Jingwei, which is that she is one of the safest, if not maybe the safest hunter that you can have. She's 100%. Very good at getting away. A lot of the engage that they have, I mean, Mercury's toss, a Kukulkan knockup, pretty much anything except for a Fafnir hammer, she's going to be able to get out of pretty easily or escape from afterward. And so I think there's a lot of maneuverability for Emilito to survive, maybe not thrive.
And I think that's a big key of, like, can Mercury even gank that lane and get an effective kill off? Maybe burn some beats, maybe burn an ultimate. But there's going to have to be a continuation in that lane to try and gank Jingwei. Sol in the mid lane with a dead separate. It's going to be on zeros, just keep an eye on his wall placements. But hopefully getting a bit of protection from his jungler and his support there too. Big game, though, between the two. Not really for Valkyries, in my opinion, but for Dragons specifically. If they do take this series, they do push themselves into that number 2 spot for the time being alone, and that would give them the opportunity to draft the group stage on Friday. However, if they lose this against Valkyries, they are probably out of contention, all being well, of getting that number 2 spot, which could have significant effects for them. So Dragons, this matters a lot to them winning this game today to try and shoehorn themselves into that number 2 spot, and at worst case, put themselves in a tiebreaker situation of who's going to be that second seed there. So a lot to play for Dragons, and I'm not really surprised that they're still giving it their all at the moment.
You know, Hindu, I just can't help but look. I pulled the standings up over on my left just because I wanted to cause you some distress. If the Dragons, the Kings, and the Bolts, all 3 lose, we actually end up in a 4-way tie.
Shut up, Gore.
Because the Titans
Shut up,
would
Gore.
have to beat the Bolts. We
No.
have 4 teams at 4 and 3, so that's a lot of games that we'd have to play tomorrow night. But that is a realm that we are not entering just yet. The
If
Dragons
that happens,
if that happens,
that's
I
all
said
you,
this.
man. You are casting solo that
I'm gonna
entire
have
time.
to
I'm
cast
just letting you
every
know.
single set, aren't I? Yep, I just know.
If we get a 4-way tie,
That's-
it's you alone for the entire time. I'm just letting you know now. You put yourself in
Fair
that
enough.
spot, Gore.
You know
So
what?
the guys, just so you guys know, we just got through picks
Yeah.
and bans. The guys are now loading into games, so we're about a few minutes out, just as a heads up. Sorry about the delays, but, you know, with all the issues going on, it's not that easy all the time to get everybody ready to go, but these guys are loading in now. And with that, I mean, we've talked about the drafts a little bit, with the mid laners. Are you surprised by how Valkyries came out today, though, Gore?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, very similar to how I felt when I saw the Scarabs have success in the against the Dragons. Like, it's weird to think about it. The fact that these teams are so close, but the standings indicate something different. Like going into the last week of play we had prior to this, the Dragons were an undefeated team, and it was unheard of to think of them losing. They lose to the Bolts, and it's like, okay, well, you know, they're a close enough team. But now that we've seen the Scarabs give them a lot of trouble, the Valkyries give them a lot of trouble, I think it showcases that the talent at the bottom end, quote-unquote bottom end of the league, is not anywhere near as far behind as I would even argue last year. And so it's getting closer and closer, and I think every week, I mean, think of it when the Valkyries are able to move over here and finally, you know, like, play in the US, that's going to be absolutely insane on that. But also it showcases that the Dragons, what was a team that everyone kind of expected to be pseudo-infallible coming into this year, is nowhere near that. And I think even the Leviathans, who have lost a game so far this year as well, it just goes to show that we are in a more competitive set of SMITE and state of SMITE than I think anybody really expected, us included, and that goes to just make things way more interesting week to week. It makes me a lot more excited. Like, this was a set I thought you, again, would have asked me. I would have told you it was probably a 2-0, probably the Dragons winning, 2 25 to 28-minute games, and then we'd be moving on to set number 2. But the Valkyries making things a little more interesting, showcasing that the Titans, you know, the Warriors, all of these teams towards the bottom that are making things a lot more interesting, makes it way more fun to come in and cast, and kind of helps, you know, again, distract us from the woes and worries of the world.
I mean, obviously, as well, with that, the group stages are coming up on Friday. We're going to see a group draw, whatever happens.
Yeah.
And Scarabs and Valkyries are 2 of the 3 bottom teams, I'd say, at the moment in the league. But at the same time, even these guys can compete in those groups by the looks of it, especially when you're going against Dragons and performing as well as they did in that first game. So with that all being said, we're tied up at 1-1. The bans are in. The picks are in. I don't know who I feel stronger for. I feel Dragons are probably going to be the ones to come out on top of this. But for now, we're going to have to go to a very, very quick break, all being well. We'll be back with the game shortly. As soon as we're back, you'll see us on screen. Welcome back to the SMITE Pro League, powered by Alienware. At the moment, the guys are still getting themselves in game. Just so you know, there was 2 remakes that happened between the teams. We're trying to get the situation as best we can for the international players. So there's a few remakes that may have happened, and that's why the delay is. We should be in game in a couple of minutes. But me and Gore are back real quick just to go through the picks and bans one more time so you can all see them. Once again, Valkyries though, going with that Gilgamesh and Sobek pickup, but this time, Gore, they did get the Sol away from Horiwin this time for themselves. Do you think that's going to be enough to change things up for him?
I actually am really interested in that. It was something I didn't think too much about. Like, Sol still technically kind of falls into that weird, like, mage carry kind of position. And because of Sol and Jingwei, you've got 2 technical carries on this team, right? Really good for at least objective shred, in theory, being able to burn down towers, things like that. But Sobek, Gilgamesh, and Tyr, something that we didn't really get last game, all 3 of those together have some sort of displacement. Whether you're getting drop-kicked, plucked, or fearless into a wall, you're not going to be able to stand safely on the dragons. I think that's going to be something that's an interesting power dynamic for things like the Merlin, the Mercury, the Chiron to deal with specifically, or for Fafnir and Kukulkan, right? You're trying to get aggressive, and all of a sudden you get plucked and you're too aggressive, or you try to get aggressive, you get drop-kicked, and you're out of the fight all of a sudden. You have to figure out a way back in. I think there's a lot of avenue for the Valkyries to really disrupt the Dragons' team fights, which gives me a little more hope for them than I had a couple of minutes ago. Like, just kind of sitting around thinking about this draft, it feels like it has a lot of potential, and it could work out really well. It's just how well they can execute on it that really, really is going to make the difference.
Definitely, and the focus from Valkyries will be towards that Chiron and that Merlin. If they can take those 2 out of the fray, makes things a little bit easier to maybe deal with a Mercury that ends up sonic booming into the fight at a later stage. I would say that Chiron Panicat played it very well in game 2. Those cleanses could come into play a little bit. I mean, using it for cleanse isn't something you necessarily want to do. You would like the damage out, but those cleanses in some of these team fights to keep teammates alive, Gore, could come into play and be very impactful. We saw a little bit of that in that game 2.
And I'm excited. I mean, I didn't get to say this last time around, but this is Mercury's 2nd game, so this is something that we haven't really gotten to see a whole ton of this year. Chiron, the only other time it was played, the Valkyries had played it earlier this year against the Kings. Did not win that one, surprise, surprise. But it's one of those moments where, getting to see these picks come through and flourish, same thing for the Sol on at least the one side, the games that she's won so far. It's been an interesting dynamic that, we were just gone for 2 weeks, right? I mean, it didn't feel like a long time. That's not true. For us, it felt like an eon and ages. But at the same time, it feels like there wasn't a lot of room. And again, for a ton of changes, there's a couple of small buffs there, and for some of them, it's not even those gods we were talking about that all of a sudden are jumping up into here. I think it's notable the gods that we're missing, but seeing things like Sol and Chiron all of a sudden jump up, and Chiron with the performance he had, maybe cementing more or less that right now it feels like everything from top to bottom is more competitive.
Well, it's going to come down to the duo lane for me at the initial start of the game, but how does Mercury, how does Gilgamesh end up impacting across the map with their jungle play? That's the big one for me as we head towards this 3rd game between the 2. For you, though, Gore, if you had to put your money on it, who would you say is going to win this game?
You know what? I'm going to go for the Valkyries. I actually really like what their late game can do. I don't think it's a good bet. I will throw that out there. I do not think it's one of those. I'm feeling that it's a 25% success rate for the Jingwei. I'm feeling the 25% here.
Well, let's get it over then to Dave and Aggro for the final of this game. I'm going to go Dragons, though, just to try and give a different cast a curse, and maybe Valkyries win. Let's find out, Dave. Let's go.
Yeah, it's a true test of whose caster curse is stronger, I guess. Gore goes one way, Hindu goes the other. And Aggro, look, I'm hard-pressed to go against Pandacat back on this Chiron. It was a decimation there in game number 2. Hindu on the desk there said, in the early game, his eyes were on the duo lane. I think for good reason, because it feels like these last 2 games, game 1, remember Emilito on the Kronos really took that game over. Pandacat in game 2 just blew the Valkyries out of the water. His duo lane, I think that's where your eyes got to be in the onset of this game.
Has to be, because that's where the Jade Dragons just stomped them last time around. But you just have so much more fight back potential early on with something like even the Jingwei, who's known for being passive, not really wanting to fight you, more about running away and being safe. Kronos doesn't have any of that going for him in the early game. So ML is not going to fall as far behind. I'd hope. I have no idea how he would on a pick like that Jingwei. the Valkyries are in a much better position. I just wonder how well the backline is going to work together with this Soul and Jingwei backline. It's not a lot of AoE. It's not a lot of peel for one another, but it is a lot of auto attack damage. We'll see if they can put it to good use.
I mean, look, pressure was basically non-existent there in game number 2 for the Valkyries in this duo lane. And so if that's something that Jade Dragons can keep up, it's of course going to be difficult for the Valkyries to find their footing. Now, though, maybe a chance for Johnny. Still on the Gilgamesh. Back-to-back games now for Gilgamesh, for Johnny specifically. One successful, one unsuccessful, but maybe that's where you start to turn your eyes if you're Johnny here. Some early scrapping in the duo lane is expected, but plenty of tankiness and disengage between both of the hunters here that maybe the kill pressure starts to feel a little bit less. But now, Aggro, we've had really 2 games, and we'll get a 3rd game of data here on Gilgamesh. Oh, Hurrywin has to use the beads, and Gilgamesh right on cue walks on in, and they just body block out Hurrywin. Hurrywin's level 2, likely didn't have the flicker online and couldn't walk out of that.
Nope, no flicker, no chance to survive. Then probably should have held on. I mean, certainly should have held on to the beads in that spot, but probably just got surprised by both Zeros and Johnny coming around that corner. That's just good aggressiveness on that side of the map.
No! Oh man, I'm just wrong, huh? I thought there was going to be some fighting, but maybe not all that much killing going on. But the Jade Dragons then find some damage. And then if you're a Dragons fan, that's the immediate return that you were hoping would happen here in this game after a bit of a miscue there in the mid lane. Hurrywin going down. And then you immediately find pressure over on the left. And now it could get worse here. PBM leaps in. Raffer stuck around. Mike searching for some damage, but at this point with Emilito rotating over, Raffer will survive, but the pain seems to continue here. Could get worse if this purple buff gets invaded.
And Final K's got to be careful because Johnny isn't on the left. He's coming towards this right-hand side. Good idea to jump out of that Fearless. And that means that this invade on the right-hand side, Valkyrie's going to try and trade out, not give pressure on both sides of the map to the Dragons.
Bit of a coin toss here on the left-hand side. Purple buff invades Sam for Soccer being walked at by Johnny. There's a good sense of this early game matchup between the Mercury and the Gilgamesh. Needs some time to Sam for Soccer. Now it's Fine OK who gets leapt upon by Guild, but Fine OK will keep himself alive and he'll back away. So Ducky, we'll see if he rotates over and grabs the blue buff here in just a second. But Fine OK already feeling some pressure. And it took a little while for us to see any of this, right? In game number 1, or game number 2 rather. Already trying to keep Fine OK within a manageable threshold here in game 3.
And Tyr is the type of pick that can do it because it sets up ganks so well. You just have such a long CC chain. You've got great sustain. You're willing to fight in that lane really, really consistently. So the Tyr pick I like here for Ducky, but it is risky on how well it scales or how well it might not scale come later stages.
Zeros has beads, Zeros uses beads, but Sam for Soccer is able to close the gap, and now just a waltz on into mid lane. Sam for Soccer just ticked over to level 5 with that. And I guess that's the threat right in this mid lane. You have Hurrywin early on, who didn't have the flicker, and Zeros with the Disapparate, yeah, can get out, but takes a little bit of time to get into that stance. Maybe the mid lane aggro is where these junglers are able to find a little bit more consistent pressure in the early.
Not using their vision shards appropriately so far, Dave. That's what I would say. Both the mid laners getting surprised by that. I mean, look, you're going to be using it. I think they were down for both kills, but just in the wrong spots. Sam finds a good angle, switches up his jungle path, just keeps Zeros on his toes, doesn't let him track him easily and go with a standard sort of clear path. And it ends up being a really, really easy kill for the Dragons and giving them another opportunity to get another free kill because Sam has that Sonic Boom ready. I'd be looking down mid lane if I were him.
That's right, somewhere to look now if Sam for Soccer is able to find his way, but instead it's the red buff now for Zeros and flies right on through. There's a Disapparate for Zeros, but on the other side, Hurrywin awaits, and now it's a repeat of the mid lane gank just over by the red buff, and Hurrywin finds his first kill of the game. Sam for Soccer, his first assist now of the game. And Merlin starting to roll here a little bit aggro. Maybe the itemization now at a point where Merlin with a couple kills under his belt can start to make use, start to feel impactful in these mid and maybe even late game fights if we get there.
Really good patience from Herwin, knowing the Disapparate was being charged, holds on to the damage that he needed in order to confirm that kill and give himself a nice lead. And Merlin's one of those characters that is difficult to fight against when he has a lead because he can play a little bit more aggressively.
Yep.
He is a stance switcher, so he has extra buttons to use basically at all given times in comparison to what Zeros is going to be able to do. Wouldn't be surprised to see Hurry play a little bit more aggressively up in this lane, try and poke out with some extra confidence. But on the other side, Soul does have lifesteal boots. Soul has some sustain built into the kit. Not going to be an easy solo kill by any means.
Now, but getting Sanford Soccer as well off to a good start here. Important in finding some value with this Mercury. We've got a jungle duel going on now. It's Johnny up and down, and Johnny finds the 1v1. Final-K leaps over the wall to help out his jungler. But the true 1v1 goes over to Johnny, but it might just get worse here for the Jade Dragons. It's a collapse in from Raffer, a blink forward from Ducky. Nobody from the mid lane rotating over to help out the solo laner, and the Valhalla Valkyries make it a 2-for-1. Looks like an up and over from Emilito now as well. Ducky's got a double. What happens over here in the mid lane? Now with this tier picking up a couple of kills, this was the threat that we figured might be here for Ducky on the tier this game, controlling a lot of the aspects of this early game, and Emilito will survive with a sliver of HP. 18 health was the highest I saw, maybe a little bit more, but I'm not going to get a chance to breathe here. It's a run back for the third time. Sanford Soccer and Hurrywind combined for a kill in mid.
Yeah, poor Zero is really getting the treatment so far in this one, 0-3, just 7 minutes in. But you've got a side of the map that's in a good position right now. It's that right-hand side, but Johnny not there anymore. Going to walk into Sam. And Sam had such a good game on this Mercury in game 2 of this set. He was all over the place, really impacting multiple lanes, and he's looking comfortable to get again on it here in game 3.
Talk about a 1-2 punch that we've seen now. Sanford Soccer and Hurrywind combining time and time and time again, and Sanford Soccer is going to continue the onslaught here. Mike hits the axe, and down goes Emil. And the Jade Dragons, Aggro, this is shades of game 2. You are nervous now if you're the Valkyries or a Valkyries fan, because it seems like the beast has awoken after game 2, and now leading on into game 3. It's almost the exact same trend, just in a different lane of the map. Hurrywind's got a couple of kills. He's got a 2-level lead over Zeros on the other side. It's about keeping that pressure going now against a lane that has easier access to the rest of the map than Panda Cat did on the Chiron.
It's such a tough position to be in now if you're the Valkyries, because your carries are just so far behind. You got 2-level deficits in mid and in ADC.
Still bad in duo.
And it's just not looking good for the backline of the Valkyries. Now the good news is that Ducky's pretty big on this tier, so you'd hope that maybe they can make an impact there, but Sam has never once taken his foot off the gas pedal. He very clearly displeased with how they've been doing so far the last few games, the last few weeks. He is really turning it up here. 7 out of the 8 kills 9 minutes in, Sam has made his mark on.
Sanford Soccer on an absolute tear. We wondered how the meta would look at the resume here today, and apparently Sanford Soccer is feeling good about this Mercury pick. It's a pluck in onto Hurrywind, but that's a lurking in the waters out from Raffer. Chiron's coin for Hurrywind. We've talked a bit about that item, and that's why you see some of that easy damage already flying through onto Raffer. Just one rotation of spells from the mid laner feels good, and being 3 levels ahead tends to help in that regard as well. Now, all Valkyries are going to take their opening here. It's a Greater Scorpion started up, but then left as Johnny tries to collapse onto Final K, but the distance was difficult there. Final K pulled back in to the Gilgamesh ultimate, but look at the damage that's been turned around. Ducky attempting to dive the tier 1 tower. Final K goes back through, but the heal is enough to keep Ducky alive for now. Final K sends 3 packing.
Really well played there by Fine, just playing it nice and slow. Let's not make a mistake. We'll just sit underneath the tower. They can come to me if they want, but I'm going to be able to put out more damage than they can really handle. Johnny, Raffer, and Ducky just not tanky enough in order to dive a tower that early on. And Fine OK makes it look easy afterwards with the blink in from Ducky. Fine far too ready with his reaction.
Yeah, Final K felt good in a 3v1. I think the 1v1 still feeling good for Final K over there on the right-hand side of the map. The Tainted Steel, or the Tainted Axe, because he has been feeling good for Final K over there. Last couple of games has had that, and the Cullen has felt near untouchable so far. So, as the meta has shifted aggro, maybe that's something that, albeit not entirely new, we've seen that starter item a couple of times, but Final K, one of the great theory crafting minds here in the league, feeling like that's one of the best ways to go here on this pick.
Think that if you can get to the late game, Sundering Axe and Hero's Axe, both the upgrades for this feel really, really strong. You do feel a little bit weaker, certainly in your damage output, with the Warrior's Axe in comparison to something like Bluestone,
Warrior's
but
Axe, yep.
on a god like Cullen, you're going to be able to do a lot of work anyways, so it's not too much of a concern. He's going pure tank boots, Gaia, Warrior's Axe, and just going to let his base damage do the work for him.
It feels about standard there out of the soul lane. Hurrywin plucked over, immediately dropped kicked back by Johnny. Great target selection there from the Valkyries, and they've gotten a pick on maybe the most priority target. Final K flies on in, big knockup from the Cullen. Johnny drops down the whirlwind, but it's not enough to save his life, and now the rest of the Dragons collapse on through. It's a standout performance from everyone on the Dragons, but Final K starting to turn up here in the last couple of minutes. Ducky, your days are numbered, my friend, it feels, and it's going to be PBM picking up his second of the game.
And Raffer may have signed his own death warrant by going in to try and help.
That's 3,
Indeed,
wow.
He does. It's 4 for 1 in favor of the Dragons. And that's just the problem, that you know that Hurwin doesn't have beads. You know that we can get this pick, and he's really far ahead, so it's worth making sure that he dies. But then he ends up taking everything in order to die. I mean, it's every ultimate pretty much in order to get him down. And the rest of the Dragons are just there in force. Mike's able to put out a lot of damage, as is Fafnir, because he's level 12. He's the highest level on the Valkyries right now as a Fafnir. And Fafnir does a lot of damage whenever he's ahead. So difficult position for the Valkyries to be in. You've got to try and get that pick and get out of danger. Just give up whatever you need to give up and try and escape with as many lives as you can.
Here's the problem, Agro. We've already used our small boulder that looks like a big boulder or whatever there in game 1. We've got to find something in the boulder conversation for game 2, because we're getting there. Maybe like a reverse SpongeBob. It's not a rock, it's a boulder, but I don't think that one connects quite the same.
Oh, no, that's hitting for me, for sure.
All right, so it connects. So that's where we're at right now. We're on the reverse SpongeBob Pioneer boulder riding status now for the Jade Dragons, who are about 6,500 gold up. 13 minutes into this game, Fire Giant flies through. Pyromancer is there as well. The Fury respawning in a couple of minutes. Seems like we're in take what you want type territory now for the Jade Dragons. In Valhalla Valkyries, fingers crossed once again for some sort of slip-up from a team that has apparently found its footing once more.
Sam just off the mark on that ultimate, but still got beads out from Zeros, so ends up being okay. Maybe he hit it and Zeros just on point with the purification beads. Dave, take a look at this lead over here in the duo lane. 4 levels for Panda Cat. It's a beaut, huh? I mean, you could ride a 4-level lead for miles. That's really what you can do with a lead like this that the Jade Dragons have.
Damn, you nearly broke me there in game 2, and you got it done now in game 3. It's not a cast with Dave if you don't break me at least once, and it's happened now 14 minutes in. Valhalla Valkyries, their tier 2 gets broken over here on the left-hand side. It's just going to get worse if PBM is able to walk at Emilito in this way. Zeros gets soloed over on the right-hand side. Let's see about the rest of this fight over here, though, as PBM will continue his onslaught. Is this going to happen? Emilito has to airstrike away. Sam for Soccer on a killing spree nearly went down to Johnny. Now Hurrywind caught between 2, or maybe 2 are on either side of Hurrywind here as Polar Bear Mike will send some damage through on the backside.
Mike's going to be tasked with finishing Raffer off himself. Oh no, Final Case here. Don't worry, he's diving the tier 2 tower and right in the right position. Ducky will eventually fall, and Emilito, he lived, but can he really feel that good about it because he almost got soloed by the enemy support?
You know?
Right, yeah, not exactly feeling great about his position, I'm sure. Look, the Valkyries came in, they had their plan. I think they executed game 1 really, really well. They came in with a unique composition. They played to its strengths. They played well. And then the Jade Dragon said, okay, that's not going to happen again. So how are you going to beat us if it's not that way? And the Valkyries seem to only have prepared one presentation for us here today, which is understandable. It's a good sign that they're able to come in with a strategy that's good enough to beat the Jade Dragons, because a lot of teams have been incapable of showing that so far. But this is what the Jade Dragons do.
How about this for confidence? Sanford Soccer dashes into a 2v1, but is quickly reinforced by the rest of the team. Johnny will pause sidestep one of the shots there from Panda Cat, but the kill goes over nonetheless. Seems like a momentary collapse onto the FG now for the Jade Dragons, and I don't think there's much the Valhalla Valkyries can say about it. We've seen games, though, turned around an FG steal. Ducky has the ability to do it, should he find his way over this wall. So I'll build some tension nonetheless, despite the Jade Dragons feeling confident around this objective. But now Raffer and Ducky, or just Raffer, are going to start to put some pressure on the Jade Dragons, who have taken some damage from the FG. Ducky has taken a little bit more, though, from the Dragons, and has to use the up-down in order to escape. Sanford Soccer doesn't have the ultimate, so no gap closed just yet. FG has been delayed. But delayed is the key word there as the Dragons find their way on back. Raffer's going to get looked at here by Hurrywind and Sanford Soccer, the dynamic duo at it again. Looks like the FG will finally go over to the Dragons.
Yeah, nice attempt there by the Valkyries, and they do some good work, but ultimately the Dragons juggle the Fire Giant aggro well enough, as Mike has really just been on tour this entire time. He just went over towards red.
I saw him at the gym
made
today.
sure that there you go. That was the beginning of his tour, and now it continues as we get into the jungle of the Valhalla Valkyries.
No, that was hyping me up. I was saying that was the key, is he saw me at the gym today. I guess I just worded that incorrectly. He even tweeted about it. It was on his checklist for today, and you know, we take those. And so Mike and the rest of the Dragons, should you close out game number 3 here, you're more than welcome. As Polar Bear Mike gets engaged on, but the engage doesn't have all that much in it, as the Valhalla Valkyries have to scatter to the wind, and unfortunately Ducky is the last one left in range. Sanford Soccer uses the Aegis. Saw a small moment there. Ducky at least gets the Aegis out of Sam, but unfortunately in the meantime, Tier 2 down all across the map as the Dragons will surge forward 18 minutes in, 5 with the FG.
Sam had to back, but it's not going to deter the rest of the Dragons. They've still got such a staunch front line between the level 16 Fafnir. He's now a higher level than the rest of the Valkyries, for the record. And the level 17 Kakulin. They should be able to get a lot of space.
Zeros has no space. It's fine, okay. We'll walk on into the back. This is decimation of the highest order now by the Jade Dragons, as Raffer will take his fourth death of the game. Zeros has 6. Emilito will airstrike away, and the safe Jingwei still with 3. At this point, that's how methodical the Jade Dragons want to be. Ducky is in alone here, and the tier will fall, and it's a killing spree for the Fafnir. You gotta love that. PBM has almost as many kills as the Valhalla Valkyries have in total. It was 20 or so minutes there in game 1, and it's looking like sub 20 minutes here for the Jade Dragons in game 3, and the Dragons back in the win column in this set.
Look, was not the start that they wanted to this set for sure. It definitely took the Dragons a little bit to awake from the slumber, it felt like, but they woke up angry in games 2 and 3 for sure. Again, I think the Valkyries deserve a lot of credit for the composition they came in with game 1. I think it was a good strategy that worked out really well, and they played well on top of that. But to run it back and give the Dragons a second crack at it, it's going to be difficult to allow them to set their feet and understand what they're going up against like they did in this set.
Right. And look, you can't put all of the weight in the world on that Neath in game 1, but still feels like a world of difference around that team composition once the global pressure went away. The rest of it kind of went by the wayside as well there for the Valhalla Valkyries. Lots of early data here, Aggro, right? I mean, we've gotten now 3 looks at the Gilgamesh, 1 good, a couple okay, maybe. You imagine that's a trend we start to see continue here, maybe jungle, maybe solo. I know we've heard rumblings of Gilg out of the support role. Maybe some more Gilgamesh data for us here this weekend.
Yeah, excited to see what else he's going to do. I think Johnny showed his strengths and also showed that once you fall behind on that character, it's kind of hard to be super impactful in the damage department, but he always has that CC. I'm interested in this Mercury and this Chiron pick. Sam looked so good on that Mercury. Is that just a Sam exclusive sort of pick? Oh, and the Chiron, aka the Pyron, of course, for Panda Cat, one of his comfort picks. Is that only for him, or will we see more of it the rest of this weekend?
Well, the Jade Dragons ride this boulder for miles on their way to a 2-1 victory in back-to-back games. Quick thought, and I'm not even going to give you a chance to reply unless it's affirmative. Maybe we team up with Nickelodeon again. We get a SpongeBob skin for Mercury where the ultimate is just a boulder sliding across the lane. I think that maybe has some merit to it. The Jade Dragons back in action, 3-1 over the Valhalla Valkyries.
Welcome back to the SMITE Pro League, powered by Alienware. And just a quick shout out once again to Alienware for coming on board as our title sponsor. You guys should head over to smitegame.com/Alienware. Check out some of their exclusive offers along with code SMITEAW to get yourself some gear from Alienware. All the players have played on it. We're very thankful to have them on board. And now we're actually on that situation where we get to discuss the end of last set. Dragons take the victory 2-1 over the Valkyries here. And Gore, that was a real rough one to watch if you were a Valkyries fan. I mean, Dragons, if you're a Dragons fan, though, you're exhilarated to see them coming back to what we've seen out of them before.
Yeah, in game number 2, they gave us the fastest win by a little over a minute, and then in game number 3, they gave us an even faster win by over 2 minutes that was able to come through. And it's just good control from them. I mean, a draft that they figured out that worked out well for them. The Chiron definitely felt like it was at home here for them, but I've got to give a huge amount of props out to this Mercury specifically, a hyper carry that we're like used to seeing be successful in a lot of the circumstances in a post-shell world. I feel like we're going to end up seeing quite a bit more of him, and Sam maybe kind of showcasing exactly why.
I love this gank.
I will admit, though, throughout all of this is a really, really niche thing. And admittedly, it's kind of Sam adjacent, but we saw some Heroin through these. I wanted Heroin to get one more assist. He has literally 1 assist off of 3,000 career assists, and I thought for sure he was going to hit it that
today.
game. But we're still waiting for one more.
Maybe next time round, but you can see the sort of pressure that started to come out of this game from Dragons, from Sam Fisaka specifically, with the mid gank where Zeros was overextended just too far up for my liking, and then the inch-perfect gank in the dual lane of Jingwei with that hold after the ultimate, the auto attack into the spin when he knew Emelito wasn't going to get time to get his ultimate off, and that's kind of how you see the standings. I mean, the good news is Gilgamesh is looking okay, Gore. I guess that's the highlight of what we can say there. He has lost 2 games, but I wouldn't say Gilgamesh was the be-all and end-all reason why the Valkyries lost that game, so I expect to see more Gilgamesh bans heading forward now, or even more pickups through the rest of the weekend.
Yeah, I'm excited to see, specifically in this next set, you know, Kings, Warriors, 2 teams, specifically the Kings, where they value Gilgamesh, but over the next 2 days and then in the group stage, like where exactly that's going to be valued and where he kind of takes precedence is probably the biggest question mark on my mind.
Here's a look at the standings, and Atlantis Leviathan's top of the shop, but Jade Dragons have now moved to that number 2 spot. And that means that, you know, Camelot Kings and the Olympus Bolts, if they win their sets, that would give us a 3-way tie for that second position, which would be played out tomorrow. However, it's all about whether the Camelot Kings and the Olympus Bolts can hold their own and do what they need to do in terms of schedule here, because the Bolts have got to place against Taurus Titans, and then the next set that we're going to have today is the Warriors, who've been a struggling team, up against the Camelot Kings. Gore, do you think we'll see the 3-way tie?
You know, looking at the schedule, I think the big question mark, I'm feeling 2 teams at least. Dragons, Warriors, Dragons with their win there. Kings up against Warriors is definitely something that I think is going to make it a little more likely for them to be able to stay up there and tied for second. But man, those Titans have been a little bit more of a wild card. The Bolts have kind of been a wild card as well, so there's still a chance for it. The most I can say is at least the chance for a 4-way tie is completely thrown out the window.
Good news on that one. That's the main thing there. Well, with that, we'll take it over then to Dave, who's standing by with Fine OK, who I'm sure will be happy about at least making second so far with how the split's gone. I gotta stop shaking my TV. What's going on? Okay.
Thanks, Hindu. Fine OK alongside me here. And look, Hindu said, I'm sure you're happy with the way that this set went. Unfortunately, I'm going to ask about, not about game 1 entirely. I'm going to ask about kind of the transition from game 1 to game 2 there. Look, you know, it had been a rough couple last sets for you guys, couple losses back-to-back. What's communication like? What's the mentality like after losing game 1 in that sort of way? Was it a here we go again type status, or you knew you had some clear mistakes to correct that gave you confidence going into the rest of the games?
We kind of knew that we kind of just like went into that game and abandoned everything that we had been practicing for the past 2 weeks.
Right.
For some reason. I mean, sometimes we wake up on the right side of the bed and kind of just, you know, get into our first game and we start out really strong and then maybe fall off a little bit and we kind of lose some energy. And then some days, or maybe some scrim sessions or game days, we kind of start off a little bit slow and then figure out what we did wrong and pick up the energy to come back. Today, we just kind of started off slow, but it was actually a pretty good pretty good thing for us, I think, because got put on the back foot right away, and kind of had to will ourselves as far as like energy and everything to win the games.
Yeah, look, you like to keep things interesting, and then fast-paced for the last couple of heroes. 20 or so minutes there in Game 2, and then sub 20 minutes in Game 3. Over the last 2 weeks, there have been some changes that have rolled through the game, lots of updates, tweaks on gods and items, things like that. So we had a lot of questions about it. Where would the meta kind of shake out? And we saw some crazy picks from what was conventional up to this point here so far. In Season 8, there's plenty of theory crafting still to go, I'm sure. But as far as meta goes, do you think that this set is pretty indicative of the strongest gods? Do you think more of those, some of those are more niche picks, or do you think you saw what might become standard here over the next few weeks?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I think you probably saw like a nice little picture of what like potentially could be good for teams. And like obviously those changes are very, very big. Like Shell was one of the big reasons that or the main reasons that like auto attack junglers weren't being played that much, maybe even double EC comps or stuff like that. Shell, you could buy it on your own carries, and then if they're getting dove by an ADC or not an ADC but an auto attack character, it's just a really big deal. So I think that you will see a lot more of those picks, but it also just comes down to like it's a pretty long season, and I think there's some teams that are more inclined to like theory craft and test more stuff out. And then there's other teams that will play like the same 2 or 3 picks in every single role. So, I'm not sure. I guess it just depends on the team. Yeah.
That's right. Well, look, it was a lot of fun to watch. That was for sure. One thing we do know, Cullen with Warriors axe and tank boots still doing pretty good there for you. Fine. Okay. Congrats. Big win here for you and the rest of the Jade Dragons, 2-1 over the Valhalla Valkyries. Everyone at home, stick around. Warriors versus Kings up next.